As the Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within, do not seek it without." There are moments in life when everything feels heavy. The people around you don't understand. Your chest aches, your mind feels clouded, and you begin to wonder, will this sadness ever go away? You're not alone in this feeling. Every human heart knows the taste of sorrow. Even the most enlightened ones once sat in silence with their pain. But Buddhism doesn't teach you to run from your sadness. It teaches you how to sit with it, understand it, and gently transform it into something deeper: wisdom, compassion, and peace. In this video, I will share with you Buddhist lessons that can guide you when you're feeling down, broken, or utterly alone. These aren't quick fixes. They are sacred truths, passed down for thousands of years, gentle hands to hold you in the dark. 1. Suffering is not a curse, it's a teacher. One of the most deeply misunderstood ideas in life is the belief that suffering means something has gone terribly wrong. That if you're sad, anxious, or lost, it's because you made a mistake, or that you're somehow being punished by life or by the universe itself. But Buddhism offers a completely different perspective that is not only more compassionate, but far more empowering. The Buddha's very first noble truth begins with an acknowledgement, not a denial. Life contains suffering. He didn't say this to depress us or make us feel helpless. He said it to wake us up, to help us understand that pain is not an interruption to life. It is a part of life. It is not a detour. It is part of the road. When you begin to see that suffering is not a sign that you're broken, but simply part of the human experience, your entire mindset starts to shift. You stop blaming yourself for feeling sad. You stop wondering why your life isn't perfect. And you stop comparing your pain to the false happiness of others. Instead, you start seeing your pain for what it really is: an opportunity to listen, to grow, and to wake up to the deeper truths of life. Your sadness, your heartbreak, the nights you spend crying quietly with no one around, these are not signs of failure. They are signs that your heart is alive, that you are feeling deeply, and that you are being called towards something more profound than comfort. Buddhism doesn't tell you to run away from discomfort. It doesn't hand you a quick fix or a temporary escape. Instead, it invites you to turn inward, to sit with your pain rather than resist it, and to observe it not with fear or judgment, but with quiet curiosity. It encourages you to ask, what is this suffering trying to show me? And when you begin to ask that question sincerely, the pain itself transforms. You may discover that it's pointing out where you're holding on too tightly to something that no longer serves you. You may see how it's revealing a tender part of your heart that needs your own compassion. You may begin to understand the deeper reality of impermanence, that everything changes, and nothing, not even pain, lasts forever. There's a quiet power in choosing not to avoid your suffering, but to learn from it, to treat it not as a curse, but as a wise teacher. Pain has a strange way of stripping away what is false in our lives: false identities, false relationships, false expectations. And though the process of that unraveling may hurt, it also opens the door to something more real, more grounded, more free. The deeper your suffering, the deeper your capacity to awaken. In the darkness, the smallest light becomes visible, and often it is through suffering that we first begin to glimpse the light of clarity, compassion, and inner strength. If you can stop running from your sadness and start leaning into it, even with just a little trust, you'll begin to notice something extraordinary. The sadness will soften. The tension in your chest will begin to ease. The constant questioning, "Why me?" will start to fade. And in its place, a quiet strength will begin to rise. Not a loud, flashy kind of strength, but a steady, grounded one. The kind of strength that says, "I can feel pain and still keep walking. I can fall and still rise. I can be vulnerable and still be whole." So when you find yourself suffering, don't see it as a punishment. Don't treat it as something to escape. See it as a sacred invitation. An invitation to slow down, to pay attention, and to gently peel away the layers of illusion you've been clinging to. With time, patience, and compassion, even your deepest pain can become a doorway not to despair, but to wisdom, not to destruction, but to inner rebirth. Suffering is not the end of your story. In many ways, it is where your true story begins. 2. Emotions are like weather, they will pass. When sadness comes, it often feels like a permanent state, as if the heavy feeling in your chest will never lift, and the fog in your mind will never clear. In those moments, it's easy to believe that something is deeply wrong with you. You begin to question your strength, your worth, and whether you'll ever feel normal again. But one of the most beautiful teachings of the Buddha is the concept of impermanence, anicca. This teaching gently reminds us that nothing in this world, no matter how intense or overwhelming, lasts forever. Everything changes, everything shifts, everything eventually passes, and that includes your emotions. Think of the sky. It is vast, open, and always there. Sometimes it's clear and bright. Other times it's covered in thick clouds. It might thunder, rain, or even storm. But no matter what kind of weather appears, the sky itself remains untouched. It doesn't disappear when the storm arrives, and it doesn't panic when the rain begins to fall. It simply holds whatever passes through it. You are like that sky, and your emotions, your sadness, your anger, your fear are like the weather. They move in, they stay for a while, and eventually they move on. But the problem arises when we begin to identify with the storm. When we say, "I am depressed," instead of, "I am feeling depression." When we say, "I am anxious," instead of, "I am experiencing anxiety." The difference may seem small, but it's powerful. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness that watches them come and go. The emotions may visit, they may even stay a while, but they do not define who you are, and they never, ever stay forever. The Buddha taught us not to cling to what feels good, and not to resist what feels bad, but to observe all things with equanimity. That means allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling, without labeling it as wrong, without rushing to fix it, and without pretending it isn't there. When sadness shows up, instead of pushing it away or drowning in it, try to welcome it like you would a rainstorm, knowing it has come for a reason, knowing it has something to teach you, and knowing it will pass in its own time. There is a kind of peace that arises when you stop fighting your feelings, a quiet strength that grows when you no longer fear sadness, but recognize it as part of the natural flow of life. Just like the seasons change, just like the waves rise and fall, your emotional state is always in motion. And no matter how dark the moment feels, no matter how lost you feel in the fog, light is always waiting on the other side. You simply have to trust the process and hold on through the passing storm. Let your emotions flow like a river. Let them arrive and let them leave, without trying to build a dam or change their direction. When you can witness your sadness with patience rather than resistance, something powerful begins to happen. You start to realize that you're not powerless. That beneath the turbulence, there is a calm and grounded presence within you that cannot be shaken. That presence is your true nature, your Buddha nature. It's always there, waiting for you to return to it. So the next time you're caught in a wave of sadness or overcome with loneliness, take a deep breath and remember, this is a passing cloud, not a permanent sky. Sit with it, watch it, learn from it. But don't hold on to it, because just like all things in this life, it too shall pass. And when it does, you'll find yourself standing on the other side clearer, calmer, and more connected to your inner peace than ever before. 3. Loneliness is a misunderstood doorway to truth. There is a particular kind of pain that doesn't scream or make noise. It simply sits the resilient invisible, and heavy. That pain is loneliness. Not the kind that comes from being physically alone, but the deeper kind, the kind you feel even when you're surrounded by people. It's the aching sense that no one really sees you, no one really hears you, and no one truly understands what's happening inside your heart. In these moments, it's easy to believe that something is wrong with you, that your loneliness is a curse, a flaw, or a punishment. But Buddhism teaches something far more compassionate, something that might surprise you. Loneliness is not something to be feared or fixed. It's something to be understood and embraced. The Buddha himself spent long periods in solitude, not because he was unwanted, and not because he was isolated against his will, but because he understood the sacred power of being alone. In the silence of the forest, he did not feel abandoned. He felt deeply connected to the truth. That's the secret most people miss. Loneliness, when approached with awareness, can become a doorway to spiritual awakening. It's not an empty space to be filled with distractions or noise. It's a space to be listened to, respected, and explored. What makes loneliness feel unbearable is not the absence of opposites, the absence of a relationship with ourselves. In our modern lives, we are constantly surrounded by stimulation. Phones buzz, screens glow, people talk. We're so outwardly focused that we rarely take the time to sit with ourselves in true presence. So when life quiets down and no one else is around, we suddenly meet the stranger within you, and that unfamiliar silence feels uncomfortable. But that silence is not your enemy, it's your teacher. It's inviting you to come home to yourself. When you feel lonely, instead of reaching immediately for a distraction, try sitting quietly with that feeling. Ask it what it's trying to reveal. Beneath the surface, loneliness often contains wisdom. It might be showing you how much you've been depending on others for your sense of self-worth. It might be revealing how far you've drifted from your inner peace. Or it might simply be giving you the space to reconnect with something deeper than external approval, your own presence. Loneliness, in the Buddhist sense, is not the absence of love. It is the absence of illusion. When we stop depending on others to fill our emptiness, we begin to discover a love that doesn't come and go, a love that arises from within. This is what Buddhism calls metta-loving kindness. And the first person we must offer it to is ourselves. When you begin to offer kindness, gentleness, and compassion to your own heart, the loneliness begins to transform. It no longer feels like a void. It becomes a spacious stillness, a temple of quiet truth, a resting place for your soul. In that sacred space of solitude, you begin to see that you are never truly alone. You have your breath. You have your awareness, you have the moment, and you have the ability to watch your thoughts, your feelings, and your stories without being consumed by them. This inner watcher, this calm, observing presence is your truest companion. It never leaves you, even when everyone else does. The beauty of Buddhist practice is that it doesn't rush you to escape your loneliness. It teaches you to sit with it, breathe with it, and allow it to show you what lies beneath. As you do this more often, your relationship with yourself deepens. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to see that solitude isn't scary, it's sacred. That silence isn't empty, it's full of truth. And that your own presence, when embraced fully, can be more comforting than the noise of 1,000 conversations. So the next time you feel that familiar heaviness in your chest, the next time your room feels too quiet or your heart feels too far from the world, try this. Close your eyes, place your hand over your heart, and breathe. Not to escape the loneliness, but to meet it with compassion. Whisper inwardly, "I am here, I am enough, I am home." Say it until it no longer feels like a phrase, but a truth. Because loneliness, when met with awareness, isn't a curse. It's a mirror. It shows you the parts of yourself you've forgotten to love. And when you begin to love those parts gently, patiently, and without condition, your loneliness transforms into a luminous stillness, a peace that doesn't depend on who's around or who isn't, a peace that is yours to keep, no matter where you go. 4. Attachment is the root of sorrow. Let go gently. There is a quiet truth at the heart of almost every sorrow we carry, something we often overlook because we are so entangled in the emotions themselves. That truth is this: much of our suffering does not come from what happened, but from our unwillingness to let go of what we wished would have happened. In Buddhism, this principle is not just a philosophical idea, it is one of the most central teachings ever spoken by the Buddha. He said, with clarity and compassion, that all suffering arises from attachment, from clinging to things, people, outcomes, identities, and illusions that are, by their very nature, impermanent. This clinging is not something we do because we are bad or weak. It's something we do because we long for certainty in an uncertain world. We cling because we want to feel safe, wanted, in control. We attach ourselves to relationships, believing they will last forever. We attach ourselves to status, expecting it will define our worth. We attach ourselves to routines, goals, dreams, and images of ourselves. And when those things begin to shift or dissolve us, they always eventually feel pain. That pain often turns into grief, anxiety, confusion, or anger. But at its core, it is the pain of holding on too tightly to what was never ours to keep. Buddhism does not tell us to stop loving. It doesn't ask us to become cold, distant, or detached from life in a lifeless way. What it teaches is something far more subtle and powerful: to love fully but without clinging, to experience life deeply but without demanding permanence from what is inherently temporary. This kind of non-attachment is not indifference, it is freedom. It allows you to engage with the world with an open heart and open hands, rather than clenched fists and desperate longing. Imagine for a moment that you are holding a rope. That rope represents your attachment, perhaps to a person, an outcome, a past experience, or even a version of yourself. Now imagine that the rope is being pulled in the opposite direction with great force. The tighter you hold on, the more it burns your hands. The pain increases with every second. But what causes the suffering isn't the rope, it's your grip. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you are no longer choosing to be burned by something that cannot be held forever. This idea of letting go doesn't have to be harsh. In fact, it should be done with gentleness. Buddhists speak often of compassionate letting go, loosening your grip slowly, respectfully, kindly, without judgment. It means sitting with the feeling of loss, not to drown in it, but to understand it. It means giving yourself the space to grieve what is gone, and then allowing yourself to move forward not with bitterness, but with clarity. We often believe that our pain will end when life gives us what we want. But what if true peace comes not from getting what we desire, but from releasing our rigid attachment to desire itself? When we cling to the idea that someone must always be there, or that life must always go our way, we set ourselves up for endless disappointment. But when we learn to say, "This was beautiful, and now it has changed," we open ourselves to peace, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances, but flows from deep acceptance of reality. Letting go is not a one-time act. It's a continuous practice. It is something you do moment by moment, breath by breath, as you observe your thoughts, your cravings, your expectations. You begin to notice the subtle ways you try to control life, and you gently remind yourself that control is an illusion. The more you let go, the lighter you feel, the more space you create inside your heart. And that space becomes the birthplace of peace. There is an old Buddhist story of a monk who carried a heavy bundle on his back as he walked for miles through the mountains. When he finally reached his destination, he sat down, took the bundle off, and sighed with deep relief. Another monk asked him, "What did you learn from your journey?" And the first monk replied, "That the burden was never mine to carry forever. I just had to set it down." In the same way, your pain, your expectations, your old wounds, your emotional attachments, these are bundles you have carried for so long. Perhaps now is the time to pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself if you are ready to begin putting them down. Not all at once, not with force, but gently, with awareness and love. When you begin this process of letting go, you'll find something waiting for you on the other side, not emptiness, but spaciousness, not loss, but freedom, not cold detachment, but peaceful acceptance. It's the freedom to love without fear, to give without needing, to live without grasping. It's the quiet joy that arises when you stop trying to hold the river still and instead learn to flow with it. So if your heart is heavy today because something or someone has slipped from your hands, let this be your gentle reminder. The pain you feel is not because you're unworthy or broken, it's because you love deeply. But now, the path forward is not to clutch what is fading, but to open your hand and allow the wind of life to move through you. Because when you truly let go, you don't lose love, you become it. 5. The present moment is where peace resides. There's a quiet thief that steals more from us than time, more than money, more than opportunity. It steals our presence. It robs us of the only place peace can ever truly exist, the present moment. This thief isn't a person or a force outside of you. It's the mind itself, wandering restlessly between the past and the future. When you are sad, anxious, or depressed, you may notice how your thoughts are rarely anchored in now. Instead, they're revisiting regrets, replaying conversations, reliving wounds, or fast-forwarding into imagined tragedies, worst-case scenarios, or unrealized dreams. The past becomes a movie you can't stop watching, and the future becomes a fear you can't stop rehearsing. But peace, that soft and sacred state your soul longs for, doesn't live in either place. It lives right here, right now, in this breath, in this body, in this unrepeatable moment of your life. Buddhism places profound emphasis on mindfulness, the practice of bringing your awareness fully to what is happening now, without judgment, without clinging, and without resistance. The Buddha taught that the present moment is not just a segment of time, it is the doorway to liberation. It is the only place where your mind can find stillness. It is the only space where your heart can heal. And it is the only ground upon which lasting peace can be built. When you are lost in your sadness, when your chest feels heavy and your thoughts spiral, the temptation is to escape, to distract yourself, to numb out, to reach for noise or stimulation just to avoid the weight of what you feel. But Buddhism teaches the opposite. To come back to the breath, to come back to the body, to gently return to this moment, not to force change, not to deny the pain, but to simply be here as you are. Because strangely enough, when you finally arrive in the present, your suffering begins to soften, not because the situation changes, but because your relationship with it does. You stop feeding it with mental stories. You stop making it bigger with fear. You stop turning sadness into identity. You simply let it be what it is, a feeling, rising and falling within the space of your awareness. The present moment is not always pleasant. It might be filled with grief, discomfort, or even numbness. But even in those moments, there is a kind of peace available, a peace that comes not from pleasure, but from presence. A peace that says, I don't have to solve everything right now, I just have to breathe. I just have to be. And that small shift, the return to presence, is the beginning of transformation. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's quiet, like a seed sprouting under soil. But over time, It grows into a steady foundation you can rest upon, no matter what storms come your way. Imagine holding a cup of tea in your hands. Feel its warmth, smell its aroma, watch the steam rise. In that moment, if you are truly present, there are no problems. There is just the simple joy of being alive. Now, imagine living more of your life like that, not running from task to task, not drowning in thoughts, but truly being here for each moment, whether joyful or sorrowful, light or heavy. That is the heart of Buddhist practice. That is where healing begins. When sadness overwhelms you, when the weight of your mind becomes unbearable, pause. Don't rush to change the feeling. Don't demand answers from the universe. Just pause. Place your hand on your heart. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the breath entering your nose, filling your lungs, and leaving your body. That is reality. That is truth. Everything else, your fears, your stories, your what-ifs, they are shadows that only exist in the mind. But this moment, this breath, this heartbeat, that is life, and it is enough. You don't need to fix everything to find peace. You don't need to solve all your problems, achieve all your goals, or erase your past. You simply need to learn how to be here. How to be fully awake in the moment you're in. Because once you learn that skill, you truly understand how to be present. You carry a sanctuary within you. No matter where you go, no matter what you face, you will have a place to return to. A place where the mind quiets, the heart softens, and the soul breathes. That place is not far. It is not hidden. It is here. And it has been waiting for you. So when your mind runs wild, when your emotions swirl, when you feel disconnected or lost, remember that you don't need to travel far to find your way back. Just return. Gently. Return to your breath. Return to the sensation of air on your skin. Return to the sounds around you. Return to now. Because no matter how chaotic your life becomes, the present moment is always available. It is the still point in a turning world. It is the gentle reminder that right now, in this single breath, you are alive. You are here. And that is enough. 6. You are not broken, you are awakening. There will come a time in your life, perhaps more than once, when you feel shattered from within. The world may continue on around you, people walking by, laughing, talking, living their lives, while inside your own mind and heart, everything feels like it's crumbling. You lie awake at night, your body exhausted but your thoughts spinning, your soul searching for something to hold on to. You ask questions that have no answers. Why do I feel this way? What's wrong with me? Why can't I just be okay? And in the silence that follows, you might begin to whisper something darker. Maybe I'm broken. Maybe I'm beyond repair. Maybe there's something deeply wrong with me. But this thought, this quiet conclusion we reach in moments of despair, is one of the greatest illusions the mind can create. Buddhism does not look at suffering and see a person who is broken. It sees a soul that is waking up. It sees a human being beginning to peel away the layers of illusion they've worn for years, maybe decades. It sees someone who is stepping into the fire of transformation, not because they failed, but because their soul is ready to be reborn. The lotus flower, one of the most powerful symbols in Buddhism, blooms in the mud. It does not bloom in perfect water. It does not rise from sparkling lakes or golden ponds. It comes up through the darkness, through the thick, messy, chaotic mud. It rises through resistance. It grows in silence. And when it blooms, it stands unshaken, unsoiled by the very mud that once surrounded it. This is not just a poetic image. It is a mirror of your own path. When you are deep in emotional pain, when everything inside of you feels heavy and raw and wounded, it does not mean you are lost. It does not mean you are weak. It means you are in the mud. It means that life is asking you to rise. It means that something false is dying within you, and something real is trying to be born. The tears you cry are not signs of weakness. They are the body's way of releasing what your soul no longer needs. The loneliness you feel is not a punishment. It is a space being cleared so that you can return to yourself. The numbness, the fatigue, the deep sadness, they are not defects. They are signals, messages, invitations to stop running and start listening. We live in a world that tells us we must always be happy, always productive, always polished and presentable. But this ideal is not only unrealistic, it's inhumane. The human experience was never meant to be perfectly neat. It was meant to be real. And being real means we break sometimes, not because we are faulty, but because life requires us to break in order to evolve. Glass cannot become a mirror until it is shattered. Clay cannot become pottery until it is molded and fired. And the soul cannot awaken until it has faced the illusion of who it thought it was. Buddhism speaks of dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness of life. But this teaching is not pessimistic, it is liberating. It tells you that suffering is not a sign that life is wrong. It is a natural part of life. And it is not the end of your story. In fact, it may be the most sacred chapter. The Buddha himself endured immense suffering before his awakening. He left behind comfort, walked barefoot, starved himself, faced confusion, loneliness, temptation, and despair. And through that suffering, he awakened not into a perfect life, but into a peaceful one. Into a life where he understood that suffering could be transformed into compassion, where pain could become the soil of wisdom, and where loss could become the path to deeper connection. If you are hurting right now, if you are carrying emotions that feel too heavy to hold, I want you to consider something radical. What if your suffering is not a sign of how far you've fallen, but how close you are to something sacred? What if the feelings that scare you are actually the signals that something old is dying, a version of you built on fear, ego, and performance, and something new is being born, a self rooted in truth, softness, strength, and clarity? What if your sadness is not here to destroy you, but to lead you to the parts of yourself you've ignored for too long? What if, right now, you are not collapsing, you are unfolding? There's a story often told in Buddhist circles about a cracked clay pot. A water bearer used it every day to carry water from the river to her home, and each day, the water would slowly leak out because of the crack. For years, the pot felt useless, ashamed that it couldn't do its job properly. One day, the woman smiled and said to the pot, "Look at the path we walk every day. Do you see the flowers blooming along one side?" The pot looked and saw beautiful wildflowers it had never noticed before. The woman continued, "Those flowers grew from the water you spilled every day. You didn't fail. You created beauty without even knowing it. You may feel cracked. You may feel like parts of you are leaking, broken, or falling apart. But you have no idea what flowers are blooming from your pain. You have no idea who you are slowly becoming. You have no idea how many people will one day find comfort, peace, or healing because you had the courage to face your darkness and rise anyway." Buddhist practice doesn't demand that you be joyful all the time. It doesn't tell you to suppress your emotions or cover your wounds with spiritual bandages. It teaches the opposite, to welcome what is here, to see your sadness not as a mistake, but as a sacred visitor, to sit with your fear not as a sign of failure, but as a doorway to truth, to hold your shame not as a curse, but as something that longs to be seen, understood, and released. Everything you feel has value. Everything you're going through has meaning. You are not here to be perfect. You are here to be present. And sometimes the most powerful form of presence is sitting with your brokenness and whispering, "Even this belongs." You are not broken. You are awakening. Awakening to a softer, stronger version of yourself. awakening to the realization that nothing outside of you can ever offer lasting peace. Awakening to the truth that your worth was never tied to your productivity, your image, or your status. Your worth was always in your being, in your awareness, in your breath, in your quiet capacity to keep going, even when no one sees the battle you're fighting. One day, you will look back on this time, the days when your heart ached, when you felt tired of trying, when the nights felt endless, and you will see it not as the end, but as the turning point, as the moment when you began to let go of everything you thought you had to be, and began to become who you really are. A soul that is not defined by pain, but refined by it. A heart that didn't close because of the hurt, but opened because of it. A being that didn't crumble under the weight of sorrow, but deepened into something far more luminous than happiness, into wisdom, clarity, and a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. Let this be your gentle reminder. You are not behind. You are not defective. You are not lost. You are walking the sacred path of transformation, even if your steps feel unsure. You are shedding layers, releasing burdens, uncovering truths that were hidden beneath years of noise. This is not the end of your story. This is the middle of your becoming. And if today you feel like you're unraveling, remember that sometimes we must unravel so we can be rewoven more whole, more awake, more fully ourselves than ever before. The night does not mean the sun has disappeared. It only means that light is gathering itself to rise again. So breathe, feel, allow. You don't need to have all the answers right now. You don't need to rush your healing. Just keep going, one conscious breath at a time. Because slowly, steadily, quietly, you are awakening. And that awakening will lead you not only back to yourself, but into a life that feels real, rooted, and free. 7. Love is not something to find, it begins within. In moments of sadness, heartbreak, or deep loneliness, the human mind instinctively looks outward. It scans the horizon of life, searching for someone or something to make the pain go away. It might be a partner, a friend, a new place, a change in career, or even just a voice that says, "You matter." We long to be seen, to be held, to be validated, to be loved. And yet, so often, the more we chase that external love, the more elusive it seems to become. The more we reach out, the more we feel the absence of what we're seeking. And somewhere deep inside, a belief begins to form, a quiet, dangerous belief, that maybe we are unlovable, maybe we are not enough, maybe we are destined to walk this world unseen. But Buddhism offers a powerful, radical, and healing alternative. It tells us that what we are looking for is not out there. It never was. The love we've been chasing in others, the acceptance, the compassion, the warmth, it has always existed, but not in the places we were taught to search. It lives within us, dormant perhaps, hidden maybe, but absolutely real. And the key to ending the deep ache of loneliness is not to chase love in others, but to learn how to awaken love within ourselves. Because the truth is, you cannot fully receive the love of the world until you begin to offer it to yourself. The Buddha once said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." This teaching is not merely a nice quote to print on a journal or recite in a moment of inspiration. It is a call to spiritual transformation. It is an invitation to build a relationship with yourself so grounded, so nourishing, so sincere, that even in your darkest hour, you know you are not alone. But the question is, how do you love yourself when you feel broken? How do you offer warmth to a heart that feels cold? How do you extend compassion to a mind that has been trained to criticize, reject, and shame? The answer begins with presence, with the simple yet profound act of sitting with yourself not as a judge, not as a fixer, not as an enemy, but as a witness. To sit with your pain, your sadness, your joy, your confusion, and your silence, without running away. To place your hand over your heart and say, I see you, I hear you, I am here for you. Not as a performance, not as something to check off a list, but as a real offering of your attention. Because attention is love. When you give someone your full presence, you are saying, you matter. And that someone must include you. Many people are taught from an early age that love is something to be earned. That you must behave a certain way, look a certain way, achieve certain things in order to be worthy. This conditioning runs deep, and even as adults, we carry this invisible contract within us. We think, if I'm productive, then I'm valuable. If I'm attractive, then I'm worthy. If I'm needed, then I'll be loved. But Buddhism asks you to tear up that contract. It asks you to return to a deeper truth that your worth is not conditional, that your lovability is not based on achievement, that your heart, simply because it exists, is already worthy of care. The practice of metta, or loving kindness meditation, is one of the most direct and beautiful tools for reconnecting with this inner source of love. It begins by offering gentle phrases of well-wishing to yourself. You sit quietly, breathe deeply, and repeat inwardly, may I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. You may feel resistance. You may even feel unworthy of the words. But that's okay. The practice is not about forcing yourself to believe them right away. It's about planting seeds. Seeds of compassion, seeds of tenderness, seeds of remembrance. Over time, as you water these seeds with breath and sincerity, something inside you begins to shift. The inner critic grows quieter, the shame loses its grip. And in its place, a soft warmth begins to emerge, not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakably real. This is not to say that you will never want love from others. Of course you will. Human beings are wired for connection. But the difference is, when you learn to generate love from within, your relationships change. You no longer enter them from a place of neediness or lack. You no longer demand that someone else fill your emptiness. Instead, you meet others as a whole, being not perfect, but whole. And from that wholeness, real connection becomes possible. Not the kind based on dependence or validation, but the kind based on presence, trust, and truth. One of the deepest forms of suffering is self-rejection, the subtle, constant belief that I am not good enough. It hides in our thoughts, our habits, our posture, our relationships. It whispers when we look in the mirror. It echoes when we make mistakes. It tightens in our chest when we feel like we don't belong. And yet, Buddhism offers an antidote, not a quick fix, but a real path of healing. It teaches that your suffering is not a reason to hate yourself. It is a reason to love yourself more deeply. Not out of ego, but out of compassion. Because only through love can you heal what hurts. You are not a problem to be solved. You are not a machine to be optimized. You are a living, breathing, feeling being. And your heart, no matter how wounded, has an infinite capacity to love and to be loved. But that capacity begins with you, with the way you speak to yourself in silence, with the way you forgive your own past, with the way you hold your own hand in moments of despair. There may be moments when the voice inside your head tells you that you are unlovable, that you're too damaged, too flawed, too far gone. When that voice rises, don't fight it. Don't try to silence it with force. Instead, meet it with the part of you that is awake, the part that is mindful, the part that has witnessed the rise and fall of every storm. Say to it, I hear you, I see your pain, but I am choosing to love myself anyway. That single choice, made over and over, becomes a revolution. And know this, love, true love, is not a feeling that comes and goes. It is a practice. It is a way of relating to yourself and the world. It is not always soft or sweet. Sometimes it means setting boundaries. Sometimes it means telling yourself the truth. Sometimes it means choosing rest over productivity. But always, it begins with the decision to treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer to someone you care for deeply. If you are walking through sadness right now, if you feel hollow or forgotten, if you ache for connection, this is your moment. Not to search harder, but to turn inward, to come home, sit quietly, feel your breath, place your hand over your heart, and say the words you've been waiting to hear, not from another, but from the only person who has never left your side, you. Say it slowly. Say it truly. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be peaceful. May I live with ease. Repeat it like a mantra. Repeat it like a prayer. Repeat it until it no longer feels like a stranger's voice, but your own, because this is the love you've always needed. And it's been waiting inside you all along. The more you practice this, the more you'll see that the world begins to change, because others are different, but because you are no longer begging them to complete you. You have remembered your own wholeness. And from that place, life becomes softer, challenges feel more manageable, loneliness feels less suffocating, because you know, even when no one else is around, you are loved, not by a partner, not by an audience, but by the one who matters most, your own awakened self. So when the night feels long, when your heart feels tired, when the search for love feels endless, pause, return, light a candle in the temple of your soul, and sit in the warm, knowing that love does not need to be hunted, earned, or chased. It only needs to be remembered. Because you are not waiting to be loved. You are the love that's been waiting. 8. You don't need to escape the pain. You need to learn to be with it. There comes a time, quietly and often unexpectedly, when pain enters your life not as a guest but as a resident. It doesn't knock at the door or ask for permission. It simply walks in, sits down beside you, and stays. At first, you do everything to push it away. You deny it. You distract yourself. You pretend it's not there. You tell yourself to be strong, to move on, to get over it. You try to drown it in productivity, silence it with noise, numb it with endless scrolling, endless doing, endless avoiding. But deep down, in the spaces where the distractions fade and the noise falls silent, you know the truth. The pain has not left. It has only been waiting. Buddhism doesn't teach us to avoid pain. It doesn't promise a life without sorrow, heartbreak, or struggle. What it offers is something more honest and more liberating. It teaches that suffering is not a punishment, not a flaw in your existence, and certainly not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is part of the human condition. And more importantly, it is a doorway, not a dead end. A doorway to truth, to transformation, to awakening. We live in a world that encourages us to run from discomfort. From the moment we're young, we're taught that negative emotions are problems to solve or eliminate. If you're sad, cheer up. If you're angry, calm down. If you're grieving, distract yourself. But these messages don't heal us. They train us to fear our own inner landscape. And so, we grow up believing that emotional pain is a threat, something we must control or escape at all costs. But the more we run, the more it chases us. The more we resist, the more it persists. And so we find ourselves trapped not by the pain itself, but by our refusal to truly feel it. Buddhist wisdom offers another way, a softer way, a courageous way. It teaches that the only way out of pain is through it, not as a dramatic fight or forceful confrontation, but as a gentle return. A return to the present, a return to the body, a return to the breath. It invites us to sit with the pain, not to judge it, not to fix it, but simply to be with it, as we would sit with a wounded friend, to hold space, to breathe, to listen, When you sit with your pain in this way, something extraordinary begins to happen. It changes, it softens, it reveals itself. Because pain, when acknowledged, often turns into something else. Grief reveals love. Fear reveals longing. Anger reveals a boundary that was crossed. Sadness reveals an attachment that was lost. What we call negative emotions are not enemies. They are messengers. And their only demand is to be seen. But seeing pain doesn't mean wallowing in it. It doesn't mean identifying with it or becoming consumed by it. It means being present with it, like a witness. You don't become the pain. You observe it. You let it speak, and then you let it go. This is the heart of mindfulness, not to eliminate thoughts or feelings, but to hold them with gentle awareness, like clouds passing through the sky, like waves rising and falling in the ocean. Pain comes, pain stays, pain leaves, and through it all, you remain the sky, the ocean, the awareness that is never destroyed by what it holds. The Buddha himself did not become enlightened by avoiding suffering. He became enlightened by walking directly into it, by leaving behind a life of comfort, by facing hunger, loneliness, temptation, and despair. But he didn't resist these experiences. He sat with them. He watched them. He listened. And through that profound stillness, he discovered a truth that still echoes through the world today. Pain is not the problem. Our resistance to pain is the problem. When you are hurting, the instinct may be to fix it. But what if you didn't need to fix the pain? What if you only needed to feel it fully, honestly, without judgment? What if the pain itself was your path to healing? This doesn't mean you invite suffering into your life. It means that when it comes, as it inevitably does, you meet it with open hands instead of clenched fists. You say, "Okay, I see you. I will sit with you. I will not abandon myself." This kind of inner courage doesn't happen all at once. It is built moment by moment. Each time you pause and breathe instead of distracting yourself, you build it. Each time you allow yourself to cry, to grieve, to tremble without shame, you build it. Each time you listen to your pain instead of silencing it, you build it. And over time, your relationship with suffering transforms. It is no longer something you fear. It becomes something you understand, something you can carry with tenderness and strength. There is a Zen teaching that says, "Let your tears come freely. They are the rain that nourishes the seeds of your awakening." This is not just metaphor, it is real. Your tears, your aches, your sleepless nights, they are not meaningless. They are part of your becoming. They are the signs that your heart is still alive, still open, still trying. And that, in itself, is a kind of miracle. In Buddhist practice, pain is not avoided, it is embraced with awareness. This is not to glorify suffering, but to recognize that it can be sacred when approached with mindfulness. There is no need to rush your healing. There is no need to compare your journey. There is no deadline for emotional recovery. The mind may crave resolution. The ego may demand progress. But the soul only asks for presence. When you sit in meditation and bring your attention to your pain, what you are doing is honoring your humanity. You are saying, "This hurts, and that is okay." You are giving yourself permission to be real, to feel what is true. And paradoxically, it is in that very act of surrender that healing begins. Because when pain is met with presence, it loses its sharpness. It stops controlling you. It becomes part of your path, not an obstacle on it. There's a story in Buddhist tradition about a woman who came to the Buddha, devastated by the death of her child. She begged him to bring the child back. Instead, the Buddha told her to go from house to house and find one family who had never experienced loss. She visited every home, but in each, someone had died: a parent, a child, a friend. She returned empty-handed, but full of understanding. She realized that her pain was not unique. It was human. It was shared. It was part of the thread that weaves all hearts together. When you are in pain, it can feel like the world has forgotten you. Like joy is something that belongs to others, but not to you. But the truth is, you are never alone in your suffering. Others have walked through it. Others are walking through it now, and others will walk through it after you. This shared experience of pain is what connects us. And when we stop pretending that everything is fine, we open the door to connection, to compassion, to healing that is rooted in truth. You don't need to escape the pain. You need to stay with it, gently, honestly, patiently. Like sitting with a child who is crying, not to make the tears stop, but to say, I am here. I'm not going anywhere. That child is your heart. That presence is your awareness. And that meeting is the beginning of healing. So if today your chest feels heavy, if your eyes feel tired, if your spirit feels lost, pause. Breathe. Come home to yourself. Place your hand over your heart and whisper, it's okay to hurt. It's okay to feel. I am not broken. I am awakening. Say it again and again until it feels less like a phrase and more like a truth. Pain is not the enemy. It is a sacred messenger, a fierce teacher, a quiet guide. It is not asking you to defeat it. It is asking you to listen. And if you can do that, if you can sit with your pain instead of fleeing from it, you will discover something extraordinary. You will discover that underneath the ache is strength. Underneath the sorrow is clarity. And underneath the suffering is a vast, unshakable peace that was never lost and covered. You are not here to avoid pain. You are here to transform through it, to breathe through it, to learn how to hold it like a candle in the dark. Because when you learn to be with your pain without fear, you become free. And that freedom, the freedom to feel without drowning, to hurt without hiding, to suffer without shutting down, that is the beginning of true peace. 9. Your thoughts are not always telling the truth. There is a voice inside your head that never stops speaking. It narrates your life like a commentator watching from the sidelines, passing judgment on everything you do, everything you feel, everything you remember. It tells you stories, some comforting, many painful. It whispers doubts when you try something new. It replays past mistakes when you try to rest. It reminds you of your shortcomings in moments of joy, as if to say, don't get too comfortable. This voice, persistent and often unkind, becomes so familiar that you begin to confuse it with truth. But one of the most liberating lessons in Buddhist practice is this: not everything you think is true. Not every thought deserves your trust. Your mind, beautiful and powerful as it is, can also be a master of illusion. Most people are unaware of the nature of their thoughts. They believe that because a thought appears, it must mean something important. They believe that worry means danger, that guilt means they've failed, that sadness means something is wrong. They trust the voice of their mind without question. But the Buddha taught that the mind is like a wild monkey, restless, reactive, and deeply conditioned by habit and fear. It jumps from one branch of thought to another, rarely pausing, rarely settling. And if we believe every word it speaks, we become lost in its endless chatter. Thoughts arise from many sources: past experiences, childhood wounds, societal conditioning, memories, traumas, fears, fantasies. Some are rational, many are distorted. Some are compassionate, many are harsh. And when we are unaware of this, we suffer, not because the thoughts are true, but because we allow them to define us. You might have a thought that says, I'm not good enough. And without awareness, that thought becomes a belief. That belief becomes a lens. And through that lens, you begin to interpret everything: your relationships, your opportunities, even your future. But Buddhism teaches us that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness behind them. We are not the storm. We are the sky that holds the storm. We are not the waves, we are the ocean that contains them. In mindfulness meditation, this truth is revealed over and over again. You sit in silence. A thought appears. This is pointless. You notice it. You don't fight it. You simply observe. The thought passes. Another arises. You'll never heal. Again, you observe. Again, it fades. And slowly, gently, you begin to see that thoughts are not facts. They are events in consciousness, temporary, conditioned, often irrational, always impermanent. This realization can change everything, because once you stop blindly believing your thoughts, you create space. Space between the stimulus and your response. Space between fear and reaction. Space between criticism and shame. And in that space, you discover something, precious freedom. The freedom to question your mind. The freedom to respond with compassion instead of judgment. The freedom to choose stillness over spiraling. It's important to understand that your thoughts are not trying to hurt you. Even the darkest, most negative ones are usually attempts by the mind to protect you. They are misguided efforts to keep you safe, to keep you prepared, to keep you from getting hurt. But the mind often uses old, outdated fears, past failures, stories from a version of you that no longer exists. So it creates loops, it replays conversations, it rehearses disasters. It anticipates rejection, not because it's evil, but because it doesn't yet know how to rest. This is where mindfulness becomes essential, not just as a practice, but as a way of life. Mindfulness teaches you to observe your thoughts without becoming them. To say, there is fear, instead of, I am afraid. To say, there is judgment, instead of, I am unworthy. To say, there is anger, instead of, I am bad. This shift in language is subtle but powerful. It helps you disidentify from the mind's noise and reconnect with the silent awareness that watches it all. You may wonder, if I cannot trust my thoughts, then what can I trust? You can trust your breath. You can trust your present moment experience. You can trust the felt sense in your body. You can trust the silence beneath the noise. You can trust the part of you that remains steady no matter how chaotic the mind becomes. That is your anchor. That is your refuge. In Buddhist psychology, there's a concept called vitarka vikara, applied and sustained thought. These are mental activities that, when left untrained, lead to confusion, delusion, and suffering. But when harnessed through meditation, they become tools for insight. Your mind is not your enemy. It is a powerful ally when you learn to relate to it with discipline, compassion, and awareness. Like a fire, it can warm or burn, depending on how you use it. So how do we work with our thoughts? Not by suppressing them, not by arguing with them, but by seeing them clearly. When a painful thought arises, don't try to shove it away. Don't believe it instantly. Instead, greet it like a guest. Ask, where did you come from? Are you helpful? Are you true? And then, with kindness, decide whether to keep it or let it pass. This is the art of mental hygiene, clearing out the mind, not by force, but by observation. Over time, with practice, your relationship to your thoughts begins to shift. The voice of the inner critic grows softer. The stories lose their grip. The mind learns that it doesn't have to fight to be heard. It is being listened to with love. And in that listening, healing begins. You no longer need to fear your thoughts because you no longer believe they have power over you. You know that you are the sky, and your thoughts are just clouds, some dark, some light, all passing. And when the mind gets noisy again, as it always will, you don't panic. You breathe, you observe, you return. That is the practice. That is the path. That is freedom. There's a story from Zen tradition about a student who came to the master and said, "My mind is always racing. I can't stop the thoughts. What should I do?" The master replied, "Let them race. Just don't chase them." That's it. Let the thoughts move. Let them swirl and rise and fall. But don't cling. Don't chase. Don't fight. Just sit in the seat of awareness and watch them like birds flying across the sky. If today your mind is filled with doubt, if your thoughts are cruel or overwhelming, pause. Don't rush to fix them. Don't try to outthink them. Just breathe. Place your attention in your body. Feel your breath move in and out. Feel your feet on the ground. Feel the aliveness in your hands. This is reality. The thoughts may scream otherwise. They may say, "You are not enough. You'll never be okay." But remember, they are only thoughts. They are not the truth. They are not your truth. And if the mind tells you that you'll always feel this way, remember this too is a lie. Everything changes. No emotion is permanent. No thought is eternal. What feels like a prison today may be the very door to awakening tomorrow. You are not broken for thinking dark thoughts. You are human, and you are growing. The goal is not to stop thinking. The goal is to stop believing every thought you think, to become a witness, a meditator, a friend to your mind, not a slave. This is the invitation of the path to wake up from the trance of mental noise and return to the quiet truth of now. So the next time your thoughts become loud, confusing, or cruel, remember, you don't have to believe them. You don't have to fight them. You only have to observe them with kindness. Because underneath those thoughts is a deeper stillness. A stillness that is not afraid. A stillness that knows who you are. A stillness that has never been harmed by a single thought, no matter how dark. That stillness is your true home, and it is waiting for you, right here, right now, in this breath. 10. You don't need to become anyone else. Return to who you truly are. From the moment we are born, we begin receiving messages about who we are supposed to be. The world hands us invisible scripts. Some are spoken aloud. Be good, be strong, don't cry, don't fail, make us proud. Others are written in looks, in silence, in expectations we learn to carry in our bodies without knowing how heavy they truly are. We are taught to perform, to shape ourselves around the desires of others, to reach for some distant version of success or perfection that always seems to move just out of reach. And over time, layer by layer, we build an identity not based on our truth, but based on our survival. We become what we believe others will accept. We wear masks, we build walls. We shrink ourselves to fit into boxes that were never ours to begin with. And somewhere along the way, we begin to forget who we really are. We forget the softness we had as children, the joy that came without reason, the curiosity that bloomed naturally, the light that didn't need to be earned. We forget that our worth was never meant to come from approval or applause, but from presence, from being, from breath. We trade authenticity for belonging. We trade truth for acceptance. And the cost is great. Because when you spend your life trying to become someone else, you lose touch with the only person who can ever truly bring you peace yourself. But Buddhism teaches a different way. It does not ask you to improve yourself to the point of perfection. It does not tell you to chase some enlightened version of who you should be. It teaches you to return. Return to the self that exists before thought, before ego, before conditioning. The self that has always been here, quietly witnessing, gently waiting, underneath all the noise. This self is not something you must invent. It is something you must remember. The Buddha never said, "Become someone else." He taught the path of seeing clearly, of peeling away illusion. of waking up not into someone new, but into the truth that was always there beneath the distortion. Enlightenment is not self-improvement, it is self-remembrance. It is the quiet realization that you were never broken, that you were never too much or not enough, that everything you need already exists within you. When we chase the idea of becoming better, we often do so from a place of self-rejection. We see our current self as a problem to be fixed. But that mindset carries suffering, because it teaches us that peace is always somewhere else, in the next version, the next level, the next transformation. Buddhism invites us to question that chase, to pause, to look inward and ask, what if I'm not here to become someone else? What if I'm here to let go of everything I'm not? This letting go is not easy. It takes courage to remove the masks we've worn for so long. It takes tenderness to meet the paths of ourselves we've abandoned. It takes compassion to welcome the pieces of us that don't look like the world's definition of worthy. But this is the path, not forward, but inward, not towards perfection, but towards presence. In meditation, you begin to taste this truth. You sit in silence, and at first, the mind fights. It throws stories, judgments, identities, plans, regrets. But as you breathe, as you watch, as you soften, something begins to shift. You feel a glimpse of something underneath the thoughts, a spaciousness, a stillness, a quiet sense of home. That is your original self. That is the place within you that has never been confused, never been ashamed, never needed validation. And the more you touch it, the more you begin to trust it. You begin to see that you don't need to wear armor in every room. You don't need to shrink to make others comfortable. You don't need to compare your journey to someone else's highlight reel. You are walking a sacred path, even if no one else sees it. You are growing, even if the growth is invisible. You are healing, even if it still hurts. And you are already enough, even if you haven't yet realized it. Buddhist teachings often speak of Buddha Nature, the inherent potential within every being to awaken. This nature is not something you earn, it is your birthright. It is who you are beneath the conditioning. And when you stop trying to become and start learning to be, you begin to connect with it, slowly, gently, truly. This shift is subtle. You might find yourself being less reactive, more present. You might notice moments of joy arising for no reason. You might feel compassion where there once was anger. You might begin to sit with your own sadness, not as an enemy, but as a guest. And in those moments, you are not becoming someone new. You are remembering the one you've always been. And yes, the world will still try to convince you otherwise. It will tell you to do more, be more, fix yourself, chase the next thing. But the deeper your practice, the easier it becomes to smile at those voices and say, "No, thank you. I know who I am. I don't need to become anything else." There's a beautiful Zen saying, "When the flower blooms, the bees come uninvited." It means that when you align with your true self, when you allow your inner light to shine naturally without forcing, without pretending, you attract the right people, the right experiences, the right peace. Not because you chased them, but because you became real. And realness is magnetic. If you are tired of pretending, of performing, of striving endlessly towards some image of who you think you're supposed to be, let this be your gentle invitation. Come home. Come home to your breath. Come home to your body. Come home to the silence within you that asks for nothing and loves you as you are. Sit with that silence. Let it wash over you. Let it hold the parts of you you've hidden. Let it remind you that you are not a project to be completed. You are a presence to be lived. This doesn't mean you stop growing, but it means you grow from a place of love, not lack. You evolve not because you hate who you are, but because you honor who you are becoming. And there is a vast difference between those two paths. One leaves you exhausted and always chasing, the other leaves you grounded, grateful, and at peace. The truth is, there is nothing more powerful than someone who is deeply rooted in their own being, someone who knows their worth without needing to shout it, someone who walks quietly but with great presence, someone who doesn't bend themselves to fit expectations but lives from the inside out. That someone lives within you. You don't need to keep running. You don't need to keep hiding. You don't need to wait for some perfect moment to begin accepting yourself. That moment is now. That permission is yours to give. That homecoming is already underway. So, breathe, slow down, let go. You are not behind. You are not missing anything. You are not the broken version of a better person. You are a sacred unfolding. You are the quiet miracle happening in the midst of ordinary life. You are the truth waking up inside a world of illusions. And the path forward, if it is to be peaceful, must begin with this truth. You don't need to become anyone else. You only need to remember who you already are. True healing doesn't happen through force, it happens through allowing. In a world that constantly measures us by what we can fix, what we can improve, how fast we can recover, and how strong we can pretend to be, the idea of simply allowing ourselves to heal slowly, naturally, without pressure can feel almost radical. We're taught from an early age to solve problems, to push through pain, to get over it, to not make others uncomfortable with our struggle. We live in a culture of urgency, where emotions are treated like obstacles to efficiency, and where vulnerability is often misunderstood as weakness. But beneath this surface-level noise, deeper than the world's expectations, lies one of the most essential truths of Buddhist wisdom. That true healing, the kind that reaches the soul and restores your spirit, does not come from force, it comes from allowing. We often think of healing as a task, something to be achieved, a wound to be closed, a sadness to be conquered. And so, when we find ourselves hurting, whether from loss, rejection, trauma, or 1,000 quiet disappointments, we tighten our grip. We search for solutions. We look for the fastest way to feel better. We push ourselves to move on, to act okay even when we're not. We compare our journey to others. We shame ourselves for not being farther along. But what if healing doesn't respond to pressure? What if, like a flower, it only opens when it feels safe? What if healing isn't something we can force, but something we must receive? Buddhism invites us to explore this path of allowing, not as a passive surrender, but as a deeply conscious act of presence. When you sit in meditation, the instruction is not to eliminate your thoughts or erase your pain. It is to notice, to observe, to allow. You are not there to control your experience, but to meet it. Whatever arises, anger, sadness, tension, restlessness, even numbness, greeted not with resistance, but with kindness. You say, "This too is welcome, this too belongs." And in that radical acceptance, something begins to shift. The pain softens. The inner struggle begins to loosen. Not because you've defeated it, but because you've stopped making it your enemy. Think of emotional pain like a frightened child. If you yell at the child, demand that they stop crying, insist they be strong, they may fall silent, but not because they're healed, because they're afraid, because they've learned that their feelings are not safe to express. But if you sit beside that child, hold their hand, offer your presence, and whisper, "It's okay to cry. I'm here with you," something else happens. The child begins to relax, the tension eases, the tears flow. And through that gentle allowing, healing begins, not through force, through love, through presence. This is exactly what your own inner being is asking for. Not judgment, not solutions, not quick fixes, but compassionate space. The space to be exactly where you are. The space to not be okay for a little while. The space to move through grief, confusion, fatigue, or uncertainty without pressure. Healing is not linear. It does not follow schedules. It does not obey demands. It has its own rhythm, its own intelligence, and it unfolds only when we create the right conditions. Allowing those conditions to arise begins with trust. Trusting that your body knows how to repair. Trusting that your heart, though broken, still beats with purpose. Trusting that your sadness, though deep, carries within it seeds of understanding. And most of all, trusting that nothing in you needs to be fixed in order to be worthy of care. You do not need to improve before you are allowed to rest. You do not need to look happy before you are allowed to be loved. You do not need to be strong before you are allowed to receive support. These are false conditions placed upon your healing. You can set them down now. The Buddha often taught about the middle path, not a life of extreme discipline, nor one of indulgence, but one of balance, gentleness, and presence. In healing, this middle path means resisting the urge to push yourself into progress. It means not falling into helplessness, but also not using spiritual practices as tools of control. You don't sit in meditation to get rid of pain. You sit to meet it, to see it, to offer it your breath. And through that sacred meeting, the pain itself begins to transform, not because you forced it to, but because you allowed it to speak, to be seen, to move through you like a wave. Sometimes the most healing thing you can do is nothing at all. To simply rest, to lie down and breathe, to sit under a tree and feel the sunlight on your skin, to drink tea and not rush, to cry without explanation, to cancel plans, to let the world spin without you for a while. This kind of stillness, though quiet, is profoundly powerful. It tells your nervous system, you are safe now. It tells your mind, you don't need to fix this. It tells your heart, I will not abandon you. And when those messages sink in, your entire being begins to soften, to open, to trust again. It's important to understand that allowing does not mean giving up. It does not mean resigning yourself to pain forever. It means creating the space in which transformation can happen naturally, without pressure. Like soil that allows the seed to sprout in its own time. Like water that allows a leaf to float without resistance. Like the sky that allows every weather pattern to pass through without ever losing itself. This kind of healing is not dramatic, but it is lasting. It does not come with fireworks. It comes in quiet moments, when you notice you are breathing easier, when you laugh without forcing it, when you realize a thought that used to hurt no longer has power. There's a story in the Buddhist tradition of a monk who tried for years to eliminate his suffering through extreme discipline. He fasted, he slept on the ground, he denied himself all pleasure, but his suffering remained. One day, near collapse, he sat under a tree and simply breathed. No effort, no goal, just breath, just being. And in that moment of full surrender, the insight came. He realized he had been trying to force his way into peace, when peace had been waiting within him all along. From that moment, he walked a different path, not one of force, but of allowing. That monk was Siddhartha Gautama. That moment was the beginning of his enlightenment. You do not need to starve your emotions. You do not need to punish yourself for being in pain. You only need to sit under the tree of your own being and breathe, to be exactly where you are, without guilt, without shame, without hurry. And from that place, healing will come, not because you demanded it, but because you created the conditions in which it could arise. So the next time you feel broken, lost, or stuck, remember, you are not failing. You are simply being called to slow down, to listen, to feel. You do not need to push yourself to heal. You need to allow yourself to be held by your breath, held by the earth, held by the silence that still believes in your becoming. And if the world tries to rush you, to shame you for still hurting, to ask, "Aren't you over that yet?" you can smile gently and reply, "Healing is not a race, it's a remembering, and I am allowing it, one breath at a time." That breath, that moment of soft, sacred allowing is enough. It is the beginning, it is the path, it is the return to wholeness, not through effort, but through trust. Trust that who you are, in your quietest, most wounded form, is still worthy of love. Trust that your healing does not need to be loud to be real. Trust that the peace you seek is not far. It is unfolding, slowly, gently, faithfully within you. Stillness is not emptiness, it is where everything begins. There's a moment in every life when the noise becomes too much. When the mind is crowded, the heart is heavy, and every breath feels like it's pushing through invisible weight. We fill our days with activity, our ears with sound, our minds with information, believing that constant motion equals meaning, that movement is life. And yet, under all this motion, many of us feel disconnected, hollow, untethered like. We've lost touch with something important but can't name what it is. We feel like we're missing something, but instead of slowing down to find it, we speed up, we run harder, we chase faster, we consume more. But the truth is, what we're missing is not out there. It has been with us all along, hidden not in motion but in stillness. In the teachings of Buddhism, stillness is not an afterthought. It is the foundation, the beginning, the ground upon which all wisdom rests. But in a world that glorifies noise and rewards urgency, stillness is often misunderstood. People hear the word and think it means passivity, inactivity, laziness, or even emptiness. But stillness, as taught by the Buddha and practiced by those who truly see, is none of these things. Stillness is not the absence of life, it is the presence of full awareness. It is not the lack of movement, it is the quiet from which the most powerful movements arise. To the untrained mind, stillness feels uncomfortable. The moment we sit in silence, distractions disappear and the rawness of our inner world begins to surface. The thoughts we've been avoiding come rushing in. The feelings we've numbed begin to throb again. The mind begins to protest. This is boring. This is a waste of time. You're not doing anything. But this is exactly the point. Stillness strips away the distractions, the masks, the false urgency, and reveals what's really there. Not to punish us, not to shame us, but to invite us into honesty, to give us the space to see clearly. When we learn to stay with that stillness, to breathe into it rather than escape from it, we begin to encounter something we've long forgotten, the simple presence of being, not being productive, not being impressive, just being. This state, though humble and quiet, is deeply powerful. It is where insight arises. It is where the mind begins to settle. It is where the heart begins to heal. Because in the stillness, we are no longer trying to be anything. We are simply allowing ourselves to exist fully, without performance. And in that space, we rediscover something sacred, our own essence. In the practice of meditation, this stillness is cultivated not by forcing the mind to stop, but by allowing the noise to pass without clinging to it. We sit, we breathe, and we observe. Thoughts come. We notice. Emotions arise. We feel, but we do not chase, and we do not run. We stay, we allow, and slowly, gradually, the surface waves begin to settle. The deeper layers of awareness begin to emerge. We touch the calm beneath the chaos, the silence beneath the story, the being beneath the becoming. And from this place, we begin to see life differently. We are no longer driven by constant reaction. We stop chasing what doesn't serve us. We stop fearing what we cannot control. Stillness teaches us that we don't need to add anything to this moment to make it meaningful. We simply need to show up for it, fully present, a sip of tea, the wind brushing against your skin, the weight of your body on the ground. These are not small things. They are the doorway to now, and now is the only place peace can live. One of the deepest teachings in Buddhism is that the present moment is enough, not in theory, but in practice. When you are still, you begin to experience this truth directly. You feel that you don't have to rush to the next thing, that you don't have to achieve something to be okay, that your worth is not in what you produce, but in what you are. And what you are is already whole, already complete, already free. This realization doesn't come in a thunderclap. It comes in the quiet, in the space between breaths, in the soft letting go of effort. It comes when you stop searching for life and begin listening to it. It comes when you stop needing more and begin noticing what already is. Stillness, then, is not empty. It is full of presence, full of awareness, full of the richness of being alive. And the more you practice entering this space, the more it becomes your natural state. The place you return to in times of stress, confusion, sadness, the home within yourself that no storm can shake. There is a story from Zen tradition about a man who asked a monk, "What is the essence of your practice?" The monk replied, "Sitting quietly, doing nothing." The man scoffed. "That sounds lazy." The monk smiled and said, "When I sit, the spring comes, and the grass grows by itself." In that short answer is a world of wisdom. Stillness is not inactivity. It is trust. Trust that healing does not always come through action, that clarity does not always come through effort, that growth, like grass, happens naturally when the conditions are right. And those conditions begin with stillness. If your life feels chaotic, if your mind feels loud, if your emotions feel tangled, this is your invitation not to push harder, but to sit down, to close your eyes, to feel your breath, to notice the sounds around you, to feel the aliveness in your hands, to come back to the present, not as a concept, but as a felt experience. And in that moment, you will touch something the world cannot give you and cannot take away, the peace of being. Stillness is not a place you visit once and leave behind. It is a practice, a path, a remembering. It will not always be easy. The mind will resist. The ego will protest. The world will demand your attention. But with each breath you take in stillness, you reclaim something sacred. You reclaim your presence. You reclaim your power. You reclaim your right to rest in the truth of who you are. And who you are is not just a body moving through time. You are consciousness itself. You are the awareness in which every thought arises and dissolves. You are the quiet witness that remains when all else fades. And stillness is the gateway to this truth. It is not an escape, it is a return. So when the world feels too much, when your heart feels heavy, when your thoughts feel endless pause, don't run. Don't reach. Just stop. Breathe. Sit in the silence, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels unfamiliar. Let yourself be with it, gently, patiently, and watch what happens. The mind may not quiet right away. The heart may still ache, but something deeper will begin to stir, a kind of knowing, a kind of ease. A kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A peace that arises not from changing your life, but from being present for it. This is the gift of stillness, not an escape from reality, but a full embrace of it. Not a void, but a doorway into awareness, a doorway into healing, a doorway into truth. You don't need to do more. You don't need to be more. You don't need to chase anything. You only need to stop, to sit, to be. And in that being, you will discover what the world has forgotten, but what your soul still remembers. Stillness is not emptiness. It is the beginning of everything. Real strength is gentle. The power of softness in a hard world. In the world we live in, strength is often measured by how loud you can be, how sharp your words are, how many battles you can win, and how little emotion you show. From early childhood, most of us are taught to toughen up, to be strong, to hide our tears, to not take things personally, to outthink our pain. We're told that to survive, we must develop a hard outer shell, that softness is dangerous, vulnerability is risky, and gentleness will only get you hurt. And so, layer by layer, we build our armor. We bury our tenderness. We replace curiosity with cynicism, openness with control, compassion with caution. But in the quiet wisdom of Buddhist teachings, you find a very different understanding of strength. One that may at first seem counterintuitive, even strange, but becomes more true the longer you sit with it. Buddhism teaches that real strength, the kind that liberates, heals, and transforms, does not come from force. It comes from gentleness. Not from dominating others or even conquering yourself, but from softening, from yielding, from remaining open in a world that often asks you to close. In this understanding, gentleness is not the absence of power, it is the refinement of it. In Buddhist tradition, one of the greatest symbols of strength is not a sword or a lion, but a lotus, a delicate flower that blooms in the mud. It does not push its way through the water with violence. It rises through darkness with grace. It opens slowly, patiently, not because it is weak, but because it trusts the light. The lotus does not shout. It does not defend itself. It simply exists, and in doing so, radiates a presence that changes everything around it. This is the path of gentle strength. When you meet suffering in your life, whether it comes from within or from the world, your instinct might be to harden, to tighten, to become smaller or colder as a way of protecting yourself. And that reaction is understandable. It's natural to want to build walls when you feel threatened, but what Buddhism teaches us is that this hardening is a trap. It may feel like protection, but it becomes a prison. The more you shut down, the more you disconnect not only from others, but from yourself. And in that disconnection, suffering deepens. Gentleness, by contrast, invites you to remain open even in the presence of pain. It asks you to stay with your breath, to soften into your experience, to let your heart feel fully even when it hurts. This is not easy. It takes courage to remain tender in a world that often demands your numbness. It takes incredible inner strength to choose compassion over anger, listening over judgment, forgiveness over blame. But each time you make that choice, you grow not in status, not in control, but in depth, in presence, in authenticity. Think of water. It is soft, it flows, it yields to every shape, and yet it can carve through mountains, it can wear down stone. It nourishes all life without needing to declare its power. It doesn't resist, it adapts, it doesn't demand, it offers. And in that quiet offering lies its strength. The Taoists knew this, the Buddhists knew this. And somewhere deep within you, you know it too. Because your gentleness is not a liability, it is your original nature. When you sit in meditation, you're not trying to force your thoughts to stop. You're not trying to bully your mind into silence. You're simply being with what is. You watch, you breathe. You observe with compassion, and in that soft witnessing, change begins to happen. The chaos begins to settle. The wounds begin to breathe. Not because you pushed anything away, but because you allowed everything to be seen. That is the strength of gentleness. It creates space for truth. Many of us are so used to fighting ourselves that the idea of softening feels foreign. We criticize our thoughts, attack our emotions, demand perfection from every part of ourselves. But imagine for a moment that you approached your pain the way a mother approaches a crying child, with no agenda to fix, no demand to be silent, just a loving presence that says, "I see you, I'm here." That compassion is the path, not the reward. How loving others heals you. In a world that often celebrates logic over feeling, success over connection, and self-interest over shared humanity, the idea of living with compassion can seem almost naive. To many, compassion looks like weakness, or worse, self-sacrifice. Something reserved for saints, or something we offer only to those who have earned it. And yet, from the heart of Buddhist wisdom, there arises a quiet and unwavering truth. Compassion is not just a virtue. It is not something extra you add to your life. It is not a reward you give others when they behave the way you want. Compassion is the path itself. It is the way you walk. It is the practice that brings you back to the truth of who you are. And perhaps most surprising of all, it is how you begin to heal not just the world around you, but your own soul. In Buddhist teachings, the word for compassion is karuna. It is not simply feeling bad for someone or pitying their pain. Karuna is a deep and intuitive recognition of our shared experience. It is the understanding that just as you suffer, so does everyone else. Just as you long for peace, so does every living being. Just as your heart aches with loss, fear, longing, and hope, so do theirs. Compassion doesn't arise from superiority, it arises from sameness. From knowing that beneath every identity, beneath every mask, beneath every ego, there is a being doing their best to find happiness and avoid suffering, just like you. When we are hurting, the temptation is to close our hearts, to protect ourselves, to draw boundaries so tight that we begin to suffocate inside them. Pain convinces us that the world is dangerous, that people are selfish, that love is too risky. So we harden, we become careful, we judge, we blame. But this is exactly when compassion is needed most, not only for others, but for ourselves. Because compassion is not just an offering, it is a medicine, and it heals both the one who gives and the one who receives. When you begin to practice compassion not as a performance, but as a way of being, something subtle begins to shift. You start to see the person behind the action. You begin to look beyond the behavior to the wound beneath it. You notice that people who lash out are often the ones who are most afraid. That people who hurt others are often living with pain so deep they no longer know how to feel it. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior. It doesn't mean you allow abuse or disrespect. But it helps you respond not from the same energy that hurt you, but from a higher one. The Buddha taught that hatred is never overcome by hatred. It is only overcome by love. This is not a poetic ideal, it is a practical truth. When you meet aggression with aggression, the fire grows. When you meet cruelty with cruelty, the pain deepens. But when you meet pain with compassion, the cycle begins to break. Not instantly, not always visibly, but something changes. You stop feeding the very energy that wounded you. More importantly, when you offer compassion even in small private ways, you begin to reconnect with your own humanity. The parts of you that were hardened by trauma begin to soften. The walls you built for protection start to let light in. You feel less alone, not because others have changed, but because your heart is open again. You realize that you don't need to agree with someone to care about their suffering. You don't need to approve of someone's actions to wish them peace. You don't need to erase boundaries to be loving. True compassion is not about lowering your standards. It is about raising your consciousness. Sometimes, the person you need to offer compassion to most is yourself. In Buddhist practice, this is where we begin, with self-compassion. Because if you cannot sit with your own pain, your own imperfection, your own sorrow, how can you sit with someone else's? If you cannot forgive your own mistakes, How will you ever see the wounded child behind another person's cruelty? If you cannot hold yourself with kindness, you will expect others to do it for you, and when they fail, you'll feel unloved again. Self-compassion is not indulgence. It is not letting yourself off the hook. It is meeting your suffering with honesty and tenderness. It is placing your hand on your chest in a moment of shame and saying, "This hurts, and I am still worthy of love." It is choosing not to abandon yourself when life gets hard. And when you practice this enough, something beautiful happens. You begin to trust yourself. You begin to walk with gentleness, not because life is easy, but because you've stopped being at war with yourself. As your own heart softens, so does your vision. You begin to look at others with less judgment. You begin to see the fear behind their anger, the insecurity behind their arrogance, the longing behind their cruelty. This doesn't mean you condone harmful behavior, but it means you respond from a place that doesn't add more pain to the world. You become someone who interrupts the pattern, who says, "I see your pain, and I refuse to become it." That is real strength. In Buddhism, compassion is inseparable from wisdom. It is not just feeling, it is seeing. Seeing that everything is connected, that what you do to others, you do to yourself. That when you offer peace, you carry peace. That when you offer love, freedom begins when you stop resisting what is. There's a quiet war most people are fighting, one they rarely speak of but feel every single day. It's not a war against another person or a force outside them, it's a war against reality. It begins the moment life stops looking the way we think it should. The moment things go wrong, people disappoint us, plans fall apart, pain arises. The instinct is immediate. We resist, we tense, we say no to what is. And in that moment, a wall goes up inside of USA, subtle but powerful resistance to life as it is showing up. This resistance may be silent. It may come in the form of frustration, anxiety, irritation, sadness, or blame. It may show up as tension in the body, loops of thought in the mind, or emotional exhaustion in the heart. But however it appears, it always has one message: this shouldn't be happening. And that message becomes the root of suffering, because life keeps happening. The rain falls, whether we want it to or not. People come and go, pain visits, time passes, nothing is fixed. And if we spend our lives pushing against what is, we exhaust ourselves without ever changing the truth. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises not from the experience itself, but from our attachment to how we think things should be. In other words, the pain is not in the moment, it's in the resistance. When we say, "This is not fair," we suffer. When we say, "I should be farther along by now," we suffer. When we say, "They shouldn't have treated me that way," we suffer. The moment we fight with what's already here, we create an inner war. And the harder we fight, the more stuck we become. But what if freedom is not found by forcing life to match our expectations, but by releasing those expectations altogether? What if peace does not come from controlling reality, but from making peace with it? This is the heart of Buddhist surrender. Not a passive acceptance, not a giving up, but a deep, embodied willingness to stop resisting what already is. This kind of surrender begins in the body. You feel it as a softening of the jaw, the shoulders, the chest. It's a letting go of the tension that says, "I must fix this." It's an exhale after a long period of holding your breath. It's the pause in which you stop fighting and start feeling. When you stop resisting, you begin to inhabit the present moment, not the version of the present you wanted, but the one that actually exists. And strangely, in that moment, you find relief. You discover that peace was never waiting for your situation to change. It was waiting for you to say yes to the moment. This doesn't mean you like what's happening. It doesn't mean you agree with it. It means you've stopped arguing with it. You've stepped into reality as it is. And from that grounded space, real wisdom can arise. Real choices, real movement. Because as long as you're resisting, you're reacting. You're not seeing clearly. You're trapped in the fog of your own judgment. But the moment you release resistance, clarity comes. You begin to respond rather than react. You begin to breathe rather than brace. The Buddha called this awareness equanimity, the ability to remain balanced in the face of whatever arises. Equanimity doesn't mean numbness. It doesn't mean indifference. It means being so rooted in the truth of now that no wave can pull you under. It means allowing the storm without becoming the storm. You cry when it hurts. You laugh when there is joy. But you stop clinging to either. You stop saying, "This must stay," or "This must go." You begin to flow. One of the most powerful metaphors in Buddhist tradition is that of the river. Life, it says, is like a flowing river, constant, ever-changing, never still. Most people, out of fear, try to cling to the rocks. They hold tight to what they know, what they want, what they believe should last. But the river keeps flowing, and the tighter we grip, the more we suffer. The current fights us. We grow tired, we lose energy. But if, instead, we learn to release the rocks and float, the river carries us. It doesn't mean the journey is without difficulty, but it means we are no longer in opposition to life. We are in harmony with it. This doesn't mean we become passive. On the contrary, it means we take aligned action. When we stop resisting, we stop reacting from fear, anger, or desperation. We begin to move from wisdom, from clarity, from presence. We stop trying to force life and begin to cooperate with it. This is not weakness. This is power. The power that comes from being deeply rooted in the now. Resistance often shows up as control. We try to control how people see us, how fast we heal, how others behave, how outcomes unfold. But the truth is, control is an illusion. No amount of planning can prevent pain. No amount of perfection can ensure safety. No amount of anger can undo what has happened. And so we suffer not because of the world, but because of our need to bend the world to our liking. The antidote is surrender. Not to give up, but to give in to the reality of now. To trust that this moment, however painful or imperfect, is here to teach you something, to guide you somewhere. That even if you don't understand it yet, it is not an enemy. It is part of your path. And when you begin to relate to life this way, everything changes. The difficult moments become less threatening. The disappointments become less sharp. You begin to ride the waves instead of being dragged by them. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. On the contrary, it means you feel more fully because you're no longer afraid of your emotions. You let sadness be sadness. You let anger move through you without acting from it. You allow grief to open your heart rather than close it. And you allow joy to be felt without needing it to last. You begin to relate to every experience as a visitor here for a moment, here to teach, and here to pass. And through this way of living, you find something deeper than comfort. You find freedom. Not the freedom to have everything go your way, but the freedom to be okay even when it doesn't. The freedom to walk through life unburdened, not because it's easy, but because you've stopped carrying the extra weight of resistance. You've stopped saying, "This should not be," and started saying, "This is here, let me meet it." There's a story in Buddhist tradition of a monk who was walking through a forest when he was bitten by a snake. The pain was intense, but the monk did not panic. He did not curse the snake or rage at the forest. He simply said, "This pain is real, but I will not add to it." He removed the poison, tended the wound, and continued walking. This is what the Buddha called the second arrow. The first arrow is the pain of life, inevitable, uncontrollable. The second arrow is our reaction to itanga, blame, self-pity. We cannot always avoid the first arrow, but we can choose whether or not to shoot the second. When you stop resisting, you stop adding arrows. You stop wounding yourself with judgment, fear, and control. You begin to live more lightly, more peacefully. You begin to trust that life, in all its unpredictability, is not out to get you. It is simply unfolding, and your role is not to fight it but to meet it with awareness, courage, and grace. So if today you are holding tightly gripping reality, bracing against what is pause, feel your breath, feel your body, feel the places where tension lives, and gently, with kindness, begin to let go. Not all at once, not with force, but with willingness. Say to yourself, this is what's here. I don't need to like it, but I no longer need to resist it. And notice what happens. Notice the space that opens. Notice the breath that deepens. Notice the peace that begins to return, not because life got easier, but because you got softer. Freedom is not found in escape, it's found in acceptance. In meeting life exactly where it is, without flinching, without grasping, without demanding it be different. This kind of freedom is quiet. It doesn't shout, it doesn't sparkle, but it stays. It holds you steady, and it reminds you that peace is never more than one breath, one surrender, one soft yes away. Let go and begin again. Peace comes when you stop trying to be someone else. There is a silent suffering that touches nearly every life, one that hides behind achievements, ambition, self-improvement, and the countless masks we wear in public. It's the quiet ache of believing we are not enough as we are, that something within us is lacking, that we must constantly fix ourselves, change ourselves, and become someone better in order to be lovable, accepted, seen, or at peace. It is a belief so deeply embedded into our culture and our consciousness that we rarely question it. Instead, we build our lives around it, constructing identities that perform rather than express, compare rather than connect, strive rather than rest. And in doing so, we move farther and farther away from ourselves, mistaking the chase for growth, mistaking exhaustion for worth, mistaking approval for peace. But the deeper you go into Buddhist teachings, the more clearly you begin to see that the peace you are searching for does not exist at the end of becoming someone else. It does not wait in some distant version of you who has finally achieved everything, healed everything, perfected everything. Peace is not found in transformation. Peace is found in truth. And the truth is, you do not need to be anyone other than who you already are. You do not need to create a better version of yourself in order to be whole. You simply need to return to remember to rest in the person you have been all along, underneath the layers of performance, perfection, and pretending. This is not an invitation to stop growing. Buddhism is a path of awakening, of unfolding, of evolving consciousness. But it is not a path of becoming someone else. It is a path of becoming fully yourself. And that is a very different journey. One is rooted in fear. Who I am is not enough. The other is rooted in awareness. Who I am has simply been forgotten. When the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree and awakened, he did not become someone new. He remembered who he had always been. The illusion of separation dropped. The stories, identities, fears, attachments, they fell away. What remained was pure being, pure presence, and from that stillness, wisdom arose. Not because he forced it, but because he stopped chasing it. He let go of who he thought he had to be, and in that letting go, he found peace. This peace is available to you, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. Not when you become perfect, but when you stop punishing yourself for being imperfect. Not when you achieve everything, but when you stop equating your worth with what you achieve. Not when everyone approves of you, but when you no longer need their approval to feel at home in your own skin. The mind, of course, will resist this. It will say, "But I need to be better. But I'm not there yet." But look at them, look how far ahead they are. It will compare. It will criticize. It will create endless fantasies of who you should be. But each of those thoughts is just a cloud, and like every cloud, it will pass. Beneath it, always, is the sky open, clear, and already complete. That sky is your true nature, and the more you sit in stillness, the more you rest in presence, the more you begin to feel it. Meditation is not a practice of self-improvement. It is a practice of self-returning. You sit, not to escape yourself, but to meet yourself, not to fix your mind, but to observe it. Not to become enlightened, but to remember that you are already whole. And in this sacred remembering, healing begins not because you have changed, but because you've stopped trying so hard to be different. This shift is subtle, but it transforms everything. You stop judging yourself for feeling what you feel. You stop chasing validation from people who don't even know your heart. You stop performing a life and begin living it fully, honestly, softly. You become more real, and in that realness, peace finds you. And it's not just inner peace. When you stop trying to be someone else, your relationships change too. You begin to show up without armor. You let people see you not the version you curated, but the person you are. And while not everyone will understand, something even more valuable will happen. Those who truly resonate with your essence will begin to appear. You will attract connection, not performance. Love, not approval. Intimacy, not image. There is a passage in Buddhist texts that says, "When the self disappears, true love appears." This doesn't mean you lose your identity, it means you release the false one. The one built on fear, expectation, competition, the one that says, "I will be worthy when." And in its place, your authentic self emerges, not perfect, but present, not flawless, but free. And yes, this process is often uncomfortable. Letting go of the image you've worked so hard to maintain can feel like death. Because in a way, it is the death of the false self. The one who always needed to be more. The one who never felt safe just being. But once you begin to let that self fall away, a new energy arises. It's quieter, gentler, but it's steady. It says, "I don't need to prove myself anymore. I don't need to compete for love. I don't need to become someone else to be accepted. I am enough, not because I've earned it, but because I exist." From this space, everything changes. Your goals become more aligned. Your choices become more grounded. Your presence becomes more powerful, because you are no longer operating from fear. You are operating from truth, from being, from a place within you that cannot be shaken by the opinions of others or the chaos of the world. This is what peace really is not, a life without problems, but a life without pretense, a life where you show up fully, where you make space for your emotions, where you allow yourself to be human. And in that allowing, you become something more than just human. You become whole. So if today you are tired of trying to be someone else, tired of chasing a version of you that never quite arrives, tired of performing for a world that rarely sees you pause, sit down, breathe. Place your hand on your heart and say, "I am allowed to be who I am." Say it not as an affirmation to force, but as a truth to remember. "I am allowed to be who I am." Say it again, softly. "I am allowed to be who I am." Feel the weight begin to drop, the tension begin to ease, the breath begin to deepen. Not because you've fixed anything, but because you've stopped resisting yourself. That is the beginning of peace. And yes, growth will still come. Healing will still unfold. But it will not come from self-rejection. It will come from self-compassion, from honoring your path, from trusting your process. From knowing that even in your messiness, even in your imperfection, even in your becoming you, are already enough. Because the truth is, peace was never waiting at the top of some mountain. It was never hiding in a future version of you. It has always been here, waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to come home, to the only place it ever truly lives. Within you. The present moment is the only place you're truly alive. There's a quiet tragedy in the way most of us live, not because we are doing something wrong, but because we are rarely actually here. Our bodies move through rooms, conversations, routines, but our minds are somewhere else. The mind pulls us backward into the past, into memories we cannot change, into regrets we replay like broken records, into versions of ourselves we wish we could rewrite. Or it pulls us forward into imagined futures, fears that haven't happened, goals that haven't arrived, worries that haven't yet come to pass. And as our minds travel across time, we forget something essential. This moment, this breath, this experience in front of us is the only place life is actually happening. Buddhism does not offer a map of heaven far away or promise that peace lives only at the end of some long and difficult journey. Instead, it gives us something infinitely more radical and more real. The present moment, the now, the here, not just as a poetic idea, but as the sacred ground of awakening. Because no matter how far your thoughts wander, you can only ever breathe now. You can only ever feel now. You can only ever act now. And it is only in the now that you can be fully alive. This truth sounds simple, and yet it's one of the most difficult teachings to truly live. We are addicted to thinking, addicted to distraction, addicted to planning, analyzing, remembering, and imagining. We live in a culture that praises multitasking, that glorifies busyness, that equates stillness with laziness. We've been trained to believe that the moment we're in is never enough, that we must always be working toward the next thing, the next version, the next improvement, and so we miss our lives. Not in big, dramatic ways, but in 1,000 quiet moments every day. We miss the softness of morning light as we scroll through notifications. We miss the warmth of tea in our hands as our minds race ahead to unfinished tasks. We miss the gentle voice of someone who loves us because we're lost in thoughts of someone who left. We miss the miracle of our breath, the feeling of our own aliveness, the gift of simply being here because we're too busy being somewhere else in our minds. But mindfulness, as taught in Buddhism, is the art of returning, not once, not perfectly, but continuously. Each time we notice we've wandered, we bring ourselves back. Each time we catch ourselves lost in memory or fantasy, we return to now, not with judgment, not with frustration, but with compassion. Because this returning is not failure, it is practice. It is the heart of awakening. You do not have to control your thoughts. You do not have to eliminate them. The mind thinks that's its nature, but you can learn to watch those thoughts without becoming them, to notice the stories without being pulled in, to allow the waves to rise and fall while remaining rooted in the stillness beneath them. This is presence. And it is available to you in every moment, no matter where you are or what you're feeling. Meditation is not about escaping the world. It's about coming into direct contact with it. You sit, you breathe, and you notice. The mind wanders, you notice. The body aches, you notice. A sound arises, you notice. And slowly, you begin to see that you are not the thoughts, not the sensations, not even the emotions. You are the awareness that is noticing them. And in that awareness there is peace, not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer resisting it. You are no longer lost in time. You are here. This here is not always comfortable. The present moment may contain grief, boredom, restlessness, pain, but it also contains the only doorway to healing. You cannot heal in the past. You cannot heal in the future. You can only heal now by allowing what is, by meeting your experience with kindness, by breathing into whatever is present, no matter how messy or painful. The moment you stop running from now, you begin to transform. It's not always easy. The mind will rebel. It will say, "This moment is not enough. I'll relax when this is over. I'll feel peace when I fix everything." But those are lies the mind tells to keep itself busy. The truth is, peace is not a place you arrive at. It's the way you meet what's already here. And joy, too, is not reserved for some future moment when everything is finally okay. Joy is in the steam rising from a cup, in the sound of birdsong, in the smile of a stranger, in the feeling of breath entering your lungs. These moments are tiny, quiet, and easily missed, but they are the fabric of real life. In Buddhist teachings, there is a saying, "When you are walking, just walk. When you are eating, just eat." It sounds almost absurdly simple, but it carries profound wisdom. When you are walking, can you feel your feet touching the earth? Can you notice the rhythm of your breath, the movement of your body? When you are eating, can you taste the food, smell its aroma, feel gratitude for the nourishment? Or is your mind already elsewhere, consumed by a conversation from earlier, or an imaginary future that may never happen? This is the challenge and the gift of mindfulness. It demands nothing external. You don't need a retreat, a teacher, or a special cushion. You only need willingness. The willingness to return to now, again and again. And each time you return, you reclaim a piece of your life that had been lost to time. The present moment is also the only place where love can live. Not the idea of love, not the memory of love, but real, breathing connection. You cannot truly listen to someone if your mind is somewhere else. You cannot fully appreciate someone's presence if you are trapped in resentment over the past or anxiety about the future. To love, you must be here. To forgive, you must be here. To let go, you must be here. And it is only here that you can truly meet yourself, not the version of you that performs, not the one that compares, but the one that simply is, the you that breathes, the you that feels, the you that witnesses the unfolding of life with softness and grace. This is the self that doesn't need to be improved, only remembered. So if you are tired of chasing, tired of waiting for life to begin, tired of living in your head, pause. Right now. Not later. Not after this video. Now. Feel your breath. Feel your body. Look around you, not with the eyes of thought, but with the eyes of presence. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel in your chest, in your hands, in your belly? Don't judge it. Just notice. This is your life. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. This, right here. And if the moment feels painful, stay with it. Not to suffer, but to soften, to allow, to stop fighting what is. Because the moment you stop resisting now, it stops resisting you. And in that space, healing begins, peace enters. Not because you fixed anything, but because you finally showed up. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to wait. You don't have to become someone else. You are already here. And that is enough. That is everything. The present moment is not a prison. It is freedom. It is the place where the noise settles, where the breath deepens, where the heart opens, where the soul remembers. It is the path, the teacher, the destination. So come back. As many times as it takes, come back from the past, from the future, from the loops of thought that promise something better. Come back to your breath. Come back to your body. Come back to now. Because this moment is not just a stepping stone. It is sacred. It is whole. It is alive. And it is the only place you've ever truly been. Let life flow. Surrender is the highest form of strength. We live in a world that praises control. From the moment we are born, we are taught to hold on tightly to our plans, our identities, our beliefs, our ambitions. We're encouraged to map our futures in ink, to conquer every obstacle, to outthink uncertainty, to dominate chaos with sheer willpower. And when life doesn't cooperate with those plans, it often doesn't, we panic. We resist. We tighten our grip, because in our minds, surrender equals defeat. Letting go equals failure. Trusting what we cannot control feels too risky. So, we armor up, we push harder. We try to bend life to our will, and the more we resist the current, the more exhausted we become. But Buddhism offers a radically different vision of strength. It teaches that true power does not come from force, but from flow, not from domination, but from deep surrender, not from controlling life, but from aligning with it. In the Buddhist view, life is like a great river constantly moving, ever-changing, beyond any one individual's control. To resist this river is to suffer. To swim against the current is to exhaust yourself. But to surrender, to flow with it, to let go of the illusion of control, that is where freedom begins. That is where peace lives. This kind of surrender is not passive. It is not giving up or laying down in defeat. It is not apathy or indifference. It is in fact the most courageous act a person can take, because it requires trust. Deep, radical trust. Trust in life, trust in the path, trust in the part of you that knows how to breathe, heal, and begin again. Surrender is not a collapse. It's a rising up into alignment with what is. It's the quiet power of saying, I don't know what's coming next, but I will meet it with presence. It's choosing peace over panic, awareness over resistance, stillness over struggle. In the teachings of the Buddha, suffering arises from clinging to desires, to outcomes, to expectations, to fixed identities, and liberation comes through letting go. The second noble truth is that craving is the root of suffering, not pain itself, but our grasping at how things should be. We suffer not because life changes, but because we demand that it doesn't. We suffer not because people leave, but because we try to make them stay. We suffer not because storms arrive, but because we pretend we can build shelters that last forever. When you begin to let go, when you begin to surrender the illusion that you are in control of everything, a strange and beautiful thing happens. You stop bracing for life. You start receiving it. You stop living in reaction and begin living in response. And even in uncertainty, even in discomfort, you begin to feel a spaciousness inside. A calm that says, I can handle this. I can breathe through this. I don't have to know what's coming. I just have to stay present. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. The river still twists and turns. It still carries you through shadow and light. But you're no longer fighting the water. You're learning to float. You're learning to move with the current, not against it. And that shift changes everything, not just inside you, but in the way you relate to the world. When you surrender, your relationships deepen. You stop trying to change people, fix them, or make them fit your vision. You begin to accept them as they are flawed, growing, human. You stop needing to be right. You stop needing to win. You stop listening more, loving more, understanding more. Because you've surrendered the need to control others, and that opens the door to real connection. When you surrender, your work changes. It becomes less about proving yourself and more about expressing your truth, less about outcomes and more about presence. You begin to create from a place of peace, not pressure. And often, that's when your best work flows because it's no longer being choked by fear. When you surrender, even your pain changes. You stop labeling it as wrong. You stop pushing it away. Instead, you make space for it. You breathe with it. You let it teach you. Because you understand that even suffering has something to reveal. Even darkness carries seeds of awakening, and by surrendering to your experience, see not giving up, but letting go, you allow healing to happen. In Buddhist meditation, there is a practice called open awareness. You sit, you breathe, and instead of focusing on a single object, you simply allow everything to be as it is. Sounds, thoughts, emotions, sensations, you don't chase them or push them away. You observe, you allow, you surrender. And in that space of non-resistance, you begin to see that awareness itself is unshaken, that the sky remains untouched by the clouds, that your inner stillness is always here beneath the surface. This is the essence of surrender, not the removal of difficulty, but the removal of resistance. It's not that storms stop coming, it's that you stop clinging to the idea that they shouldn't. You learn to dance in the rain, to breathe through the fire, to sit in the silence without fear. Because you've stopped trying to force life to match your desires and started trusting it to unfold in its own time, in its own way. And this trust is not blind. It is born from presence, from practice, from watching life unfold again and again, not as we planned, but often better than we could have imagined. When you look back, you see that the moments that changed you most were not the ones you controlled, but the ones you surrendered to. The heartbreak that opened your heart, the failure that taught you humility, the delay that gave you wisdom, the ending that led to a new beginning. Surrender does not make you weak, it makes you clear. It cuts through the noise of fear and ego. It dissolves the illusion of control and replaces it with flow, grace, and humility. You begin to trust that life is not something you must conquer, but something you are a part of. That you do not have to carry the entire weight of the world on your shoulders. That it's okay to rest, to release, to let life carry you sometimes. And yes, surrender takes practice. The mind will rebel. It will scream, do something, fix it, control it. But you don't have to listen. You can breathe. You can pause. You can ask, is this resistance serving me, or is it exhausting me? And if it's the latter, you can soften, even just a little. You can whisper to yourself, it's okay to let go. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring differently. Not with clenched fists, but with open hands. Not with fear, but with trust. Not with panic, but with presence. And in that space, you find a peace that is not dependent on circumstances, a strength that does not come from effort, but from alignment. So, if you are tired of carrying it all, tired of controlling everything, tired of fighting life tree, something different, try surrender. Not as a last resort, but as a sacred practice. Sit with your breath. Sit with your heart. Ask yourself, what am I holding too tightly? And then, without forcing it, let go. Even if just a little. Let the current carry you. Let the moment be enough. Let yourself be held by something greater than your plans. Because in the end, surrender is not about losing. It's about finally winning the war within. It's about laying down the armor, unclenching the fists, and realizing that the peace you've been chasing was never somewhere far away. It was always here, waiting in the stillness, waiting in the now, waiting in the flow. Let life flow. Let yourself flow. And trust that in surrender, you are not falling. You are finally being lifted. You are not your thoughts. Step out of the storm and into the sky. The mind is a magnificent tool, a brilliant instrument capable of imagination, memory, creativity, and reason. It can compose music, solve problems, and help us navigate the complex terrain of life. But left unchecked, it can also become a prison, a storm, a source of endless suffering. One moment it lifts you up with hope, and the next it drowns you in fear. It can paint you as a hero in the morning and a failure by night, and yet most people never question it. They believe every thought. They follow every story. They live as if their thoughts are absolute truth, forgetting the most important truth of all. You are not your thoughts. This realization is not simply a mental concept, it is a shift in identity. It is the moment you stop mistaking the storm for the sky. The moment you realize that the mind, with all its noise and narratives, is not who you are. You are not the chaos, you are the calm awareness behind it. You are not the waves, you are the ocean. You are not the clouds, you are the clear, open sky they pass through. The Buddha taught that suffering arises not from what happens to us, but from the stories we tell about it. Not from pain, but from our mental resistance to pain. Not from loss, but from the thoughts that cling to what we lost. And so, the path to freedom is not in controlling every thought or silencing the mind completely. It's in realizing that the mind is not the master, it is the servant. And you, the awareness behind the thoughts, are free to observe without getting entangled. This is the practice of mindfulness, the art of watching thoughts like clouds drifting through the sky without chasing them, without pushing them away, without identifying with them, just watching, with presence, with compassion, with stillness. And in doing so, you begin to see the truth. The thoughts come and go, but you remain. The mind fluctuates, but awareness stays still. And in that stillness, there is peace. Most of us live in a state of automatic identification with our minds. A thought arises, I'm not good enough, and we believe it. We feel it in our bodies. We act from it. Another thought comes, no one loves me, and we spiral into loneliness. We follow these thoughts like they are maps, forgetting that they were just stories, mental weather, temporary patterns. But once you start observing your thoughts instead of reacting to them, you reclaim your power. You no longer have to obey the storm. You can sit beneath it, grounded in the awareness that sees without judgment. Meditation is the training ground for this awareness. You sit, you close your eyes, and you watch. The mind will wander. It will judge. It will rehearse conversations, relive memories, plan for the future. And each time it does, you gently return to the breath. You notice the thought, label it thinking, and let it go. Not with frustration, but with compassion, again and again. And over time, something shifts. The space between you and your thoughts begins to widen. You begin to see them not as commands, but as clouds, not as truths, but as echoes. And in that space, you find your freedom. You may begin to notice patterns show. Your mind repeats certain thoughts when you're tired, hungry, anxious, or lonely. How some thoughts are not yours at all, but the voices of parents, teachers, society. How some stories you've been telling yourself for years. I'm unworthy, I'm broken. I'll never change are not facts but wounds. And when you see them clearly, when you observe without resistance, they begin to lose their grip. They may still visit you, but they no longer rule you. The ego, too, lives in thought. It is the constructed identity made up of labels, comparisons, judgments, and roles. It says, I am this body. I am this career. I am better than them. I am less than them. And while the ego is not inherently evil, it becomes a source of suffering when we believe it's who we truly are. The moment you step back and observe even your identity as a thought, I am this person, you realize something sacred. You are the witness of it all. You are the space in which it arises. This is not to deny pain or bypass emotion. Quite the opposite. When you stop being afraid of your thoughts, you can meet your emotions more honestly. You can cry without judgment. You can feel anger without acting from it. You can grieve without being consumed. Because now, you are rooted in something deeper than the storm. You are rooted in presence. And presence does not resist. Life, it embraces it with open arms. In Buddhist teachings, the concept of non-attachment is often misunderstood. It does not mean detachment or indifference or shutting down your heart. It means not clinging to thoughts, feelings, outcomes, or identities. It means allowing the river of life to flow without grabbing at every passing log. And this non-attachment begins with thought. When you stop clinging to every thought as mine, when you stop reacting to every story as true, you begin to live from a place of freedom, clarity, and compassion. One of the most profound meditative experiences is the realization that the mind can be full of noise, and yet you can still be at peace, that your thoughts can scream, and yet you can remain silent inside, that no matter how wild the storm gets, the sky above is never touched. That sky is you, not the conditioned self, not the identity you present to the world, but the silent awareness that has been watching your entire life unfold. And the more you return to this space, the more your life begins to change, because the outer world shifts, but because your relationship to it does. You stop taking things so personally. You stop needing to be right all the time. You stop trying to control what you cannot control. You begin to listen more deeply, to live more fully, to love more freely. Because now, your inner world is no longer dictated by the chaos of thought, but anchored in the calm of presence. This does not mean you will never struggle again. The mind will still visit you with fear, doubt, insecurity, longing. But now you have a choice. You can notice the thought, hold it like a cloud, breathe, and let it pass. You can say, there you are again, and return to now, return to breath, return to stillness. And each time you do, you weaken the grip of old stories. You strengthen the muscle of awareness. You remember that you are not here to fight your mind. You are here to understand it, to befriend it, and ultimately to transcend it. So if your mind feels heavy right now, if your thoughts are loud, if the storm seems endless, pause. Close your eyes, take a breath, feel the inhale, feel the exhale, and know this: you are not the noise, you are the listener, you are not the waves, you are the ocean, you are not the thoughts, you are the sky, and the sky does not fear the storm. Let the thoughts come and go, let them rise and fall, and while they do, stay rooted in the truth of who you are, open, spacious, aware, and already free. True belonging begins within. You are already home. In moments of sadness, loneliness, or quiet desperation, it's common to feel like something is missing. That somewhere out there is a place where you finally belong. A person who will finally understand you. A moment where you'll finally feel whole, accepted, seen. This ache for belonging, this hunger to be held by something greater than yourself, is one of the most universal experiences of being human. We travel fair in relationships, in careers, in spirituality, searching for it. And yet, for so many, it remains elusive. Because we search for it in the wrong direction. Outward, forward, beyond. But true belonging is not found in the world. It is remembered in stillness. It is uncovered in silence. It is felt when you stop reaching, stop striving, and begin to soften into yourself. The truth is, you are already home. This is perhaps one of the deepest teachings in Buddhism, that the peace you long for, the love you've been chasing, the sense of wholeness you've tried to earn it, has never been missing. It's just been buried beneath layers of thoughts, fears, beliefs, and stories that told you otherwise. From a young age, many of us learn to abandon ourselves to fit in. We shapeshift to be loved. We silence our truth to be accepted. We hide our softness to be respected. And in doing so, we begin to drift away from the sanctuary within. We begin to believe that belonging comes from others, from being chosen, from being validated, from being enough in someone else's eyes. But that kind of belonging is always conditional, always fragile, and always just out of reach. The Buddha's path is one of return, not to an external home, but to the unshakable peace of your own presence. The teachings guide you back, not by offering answers, but by helping you peel away the illusions. The illusion that you need to be more, the illusion that you are broken, the illusion that you must chase approval to be worthy. When you sit in meditation, when you breathe deeply and allow the noise to settle, you begin to feel a stillness that needs nothing, a presence that doesn't judge, a space that welcomes every part of you, your joy and your grief, your strength and your softness, your clarity and your confusion. That space is who you are, not a role, not a label, not the sum of your achievements or your mistakes, but a field of awareness that has always been whole, always been enough, always belonged. The more you come back to this inner space, the more you realize that nothing external ever needed to complete you. You were never missing, you were simply distracted. This doesn't mean we don't need others. Human connection is sacred. We are wired for love, for community, for presence with others. But when we seek connection from a place of inner emptiness, we end up attaching, performing, begging for crumbs of validation. When we return to ourselves, when we build a home within, we meet others not from hunger, but from wholeness, not from fear, but from truth. We are no longer afraid of rejection, because we no longer reject ourselves. In Buddhist practice, the sense of true belonging comes from understanding the nature of interbeing, that nothing exists in isolation, that you are not separate from life, you are an expression of it. You are not just in the world, you are of it. The trees, the rivers, the stars, they do not ask to belong. They simply are. And so are you. Your breath is part of the wind. Your body is part of the earth. Your mind is part of the sky. And your soul, your essence, is part of the vast, quiet mystery that animates everything. You do not need permission to exist. You already do. You do not need to become worthy. You already are. In moments of despair, when the mind whispers, "You don't belong here," know this, it is lying. Not out of cruelty, but out of habit. A habit formed long ago by fear. And that fear is not your enemy. It's a younger part of you that wants to protect you from rejection, from abandonment, from pain. But you no longer need to obey it. You can turn toward that fear with compassion and say, "It's okay. I'm here now. We belong." The practice of mindfulness is the practice of belonging. Each time you return to your breath, you return to yourself. Each time you observe a thought without judgment, you come home to your awareness. Each time you sit with emotion instead of fleeing from it, you prove to yourself that this body, this mind, this moment is safe, is enough, is worthy of love. You may not always feel this. That's okay. The point is not to feel peaceful all the time. The point is to stop abandoning yourself when you don't. The point is to stay with the discomfort, to stay with the vulnerability, to stay with the awkwardness, the mess, the silence. Because every time you stay, you strengthen the roots of your true home, a home that cannot be taken from you, a home that does not depend on the opinions of others, a home that lives not in a place, but in your presence. The great teacher Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "You are your own island, you are your own refuge. There is no other refuge but yourself." These words are not meant to isolate you, they are meant to free you. To awaken you to the truth that you do not need to wait to be rescued. You do not need to wait for the perfect partner, the perfect life, the perfect version of yourself to begin feeling whole. You can begin now. You can soften now. You can return now. This is not always easy. There will be days when the old voices return, days when you feel like an outsider, when you question your path, when you long for someone to just say, "You matter." And in those moments, place your hand on your heart, breathe, feel the rhythm of life moving through you, and whisper back, "I belong, even here, even now." Because belonging is not something you find, it's something you remember, something you embody, something you offer to yourself first, and then extend to others. When you feel at home in your own being, the world becomes less threatening. You see others not as competitors or judges, but as fellow travelers. And from this place of inner rootedness, you can create sacred spaces, relationships, communities, conversations where others can feel safe to be themselves too. So, if you've spent your life searching, striving, trying to fit in, pause, come back, not to an idea of who you should be, but to the breath, to the body, to the awareness that watches it all. Let the noise fall away, let the armor dissolve, let the soft, steady truth of your own presence rise to the surface. You are already home, you always were. And in this home, there is space for everything, for your joy, for your grief, for your questions, for your silence, for your full, raw, imperfect humanity. This home is not made of walls. It's made of breath, of awareness, of love. Welcome back. Be like water, the art of adapting without losing yourself. There is a quiet strength in water that many overlook. It does not roar for attention. It does not stand tall or strike hard like stone. Yet it shapes mountains, smooths jagged rocks, and finds its way through even the tiniest cracks. Water yields, yet it endures. It adapts, yet it remains whole. It reflects the essence of the Buddhist path: gentle, fluid, patient, and profoundly powerful. When the Buddha spoke of non-resistance, he spoke of water. When he spoke of non-attachment, he spoke of flow. And when he taught the path to peace, he pointed not to the strong-willed or the rigid, but to those who could bend without breaking, shift without shattering, and meet life as it is, not as they wish it to be. To be like water is to understand that life is not meant to be controlled, but engaged with. That change is not the enemy, but the very nature of existence. It is to live without clinging, without fighting every twist and turn, without needing certainty to feel safe. It is to wake up each day, not demanding the world obey your preferences, but remaining open to what it brings, adjusting, flowing, moving with awareness. And it is in this dance of presence and adaptability that inner freedom is born. Most of our suffering arises from resistance. We resist uncertainty, we resist change, we resist what others think, what we feel, what life gives us that we didn't expect. We tighten, we hold, we panic. We brace ourselves as if tension could stop the waves from coming. But the truth is, the more we resist, the more we suffer. The waves don't stop. They simply crash harder against the walls we build. The invitation of water and of Buddhism is to stop building walls and start becoming the ocean. Water teaches us to meet every situation with presence. If it encounters a rock, it does not fight, it flows around. If it is poured into a narrow space, it becomes the shape of that space. It does not complain, it adapts. But in adapting, it never loses its essence. It is always water, always fluid, always grounded in its being. In the same way, you too can learn to meet each moment fully, not with rigidity, not with resistance, but with open attention. You can learn to pause, to feel, to breathe, and respond instead of react. This doesn't mean you become passive, it means you become wise. Reactivity is like thrashing in a current, it makes you sink faster. Presence is like floating, you rise. You learn to choose your responses instead of being ruled by habit or fear. You learn that being soft does not mean being weak, it means being awake. So how do we begin to live like water? First, we must release our obsession with control. Control is an illusion that promises security, but delivers anxiety. The mind says, if I can just plan enough, predict enough, force enough, I'll be safe. But life doesn't work that way. Life is wild, unpredictable, full of variables beyond our grasp. Trying to control it is like trying to hold a river in your hands. It slips through every time. True peace comes not from control, but from trust. Trust that you can meet whatever comes. Trust that you don't have to know everything to be okay. Trust that you are more resilient than you think. Second, we learn to let go of rigid identities. Much of our suffering comes from trying to maintain a fixed sense of self. I'm this kind of person. I don't do that. This shouldn't happen to me. But life doesn't care about these identities. It challenges them, breaks them, forces us to evolve. If you're too attached to a version of yourself, you'll resist the growth life offers. But if you flow like water, you can change form without losing your depth. You can evolve without fear. You can say, I was that yesterday, but today I learn, today I shift, today I move forward. Third, we practice emotional fluidity. Emotions are like weather passing storms, sudden sunshine, drifting fog. Most people try to hold on to the good ones and push away the bad. But both strategies create suffering. When you're like water, you allow emotions to arise and pass. You feel anger, but you don't become anger. You feel sadness, but you don't drown in it. You create space, you allow, you breathe. This is what it means to be free to feel everything, but be defined by nothing. Water also teaches humility. It does not boast. It does not compare. It simply is. Whether it flows through a gutter or a gold chalice, it remains water. Whether it rushes or rests, it remains itself. We can learn from this. Stop measuring your worth by where you are or what others think. Stop chasing approval. Just be. Be honest. Be present. Be in alignment with your heart. That is enough. In relationships, being like water means listening deeply. Not trying to win every argument, not clinging to being right, but meeting others where they are, speaking kindly, adapting without compromising your integrity. Water nourishes what it touches. You can too, with your words, with your presence, with your ability to stay soft when the world turns hard. And when life breaks you, because sometimes it will, water teaches you how to rebuild. It evaporates, but it returns as rain. It freezes, but it thaws. It disappears underground, only to re-emerge somewhere new. No loss is final, no ending is the end. You can begin again, again and again. That is the gift of being fluid. You are never stuck. You are always capable of renewal. This path is not about never falling. It's about learning to rise without losing your softness, to adapt without losing your soul, to meet the moment with such openness that life cannot knock you off course, because your course is flow, your anchor is awareness, your strength is surrender. Meditation helps cultivate this. Each time you sit, you learn to watch the mind like a stream. Thoughts come, thoughts go. Emotions rise, emotions fall. But you remain the witness, you remain still. And over time, that stillness begins to inform your life. You find yourself breathing through tension instead of tightening, listening instead of reacting, moving through change with grace instead of fear. And in this fluidity, you discover something profound, that peace is not the absence of waves, but the ability to ride them, that you don't need to fight every storm. You can float, you can trust, you can meet life, not with resistance, but with openness. Because when you become like water, you realize you don't need to be unbreakable. You need to be ungraspable. Not hard like a wall, but deep like an ocean. You don't have to stop the world from changing. You only need to stop fighting the change. The world flows. Let yourself flow with it. Be like water. Move without fear. Rest without guilt. Adapt without losing yourself. And in every moment, let your presence ripple outwards, oft, steady, and free. Nothing is permanent. The wisdom of embracing impermanence. Everything you have ever known, seen, or touched is passing. Every joy, every sorrow, every success, every failure fleeting. The seasons shift. The people around you change. Your body, your thoughts, your emotions all in constant motion. Nothing stays. Nothing holds still. And while this truth can feel unsettling at first, it is also the very doorway to freedom. In Buddhist teaching, this truth is known as anicame permanence, and it is one of the 3 marks of existence. To deny it is to suffer. To see it clearly is to awaken. From the moment you are born, you are moving through a river of change. You grow, you lose, you love, you break, you heal, and all along, everything is shifting subtly or suddenly. Yet the human mind clings. It builds identities. It makes plans. It tries to freeze moments. It says, "Stay like this," when life is already becoming something else. And this clinging, this desperate attempt to hold on to what is naturally passing, is the root of our deepest pain. We suffer not because things end, but because we believed they never would. We mourn not only the loss, but the illusion that it was ours to keep. Buddhism does not ask us to stop feeling, but to feel with wisdom, to grieve with clarity, to love with awareness. When you see impermanence not as a threat, but as a companion, something begins to soften inside you. You stop gripping, you start living. When you are sad, remember it will pass. When you are joyful, remember that too will pass. This is not meant to make you numb or indifferent. Quite the opposite. It invites you to savor the moment fully, to taste the sweetness of now without needing it to last forever. Because you know it can't, and because you know it won't, you love more deeply, you listen more carefully, you cherish each breath, each smile, each sunrise. You stop sleepwalking through life, waiting for a someday that never comes. You wake up. Impermanence also teaches us that we too are not fixed. You are not defined by your worst day. You are not trapped in your old patterns. Just as the clouds move across the sky, your thoughts, emotions, and identities can shift. Who you are today is not who you must be tomorrow. The pain that overwhelms you now will ease. The fog will lift. And just as the trees shed their leaves, you can release what no longer serves you: guilt, shame, old stories, false identities. You are a river, not a rock. This truth brings both comfort and challenge. It comforts us when we are hurting. It reminds us, this too shall pass. But it also challenges us to let go of what we love, to not cling even to the beautiful. It asks us to hold everything not with fists, but with open palms, to kiss the moment as it goes. And that is not easy. It takes courage to love without ownership, to live without guarantees, to open your heart to what you know will end. But it is in this open-heartedness that freedom lives, because when you no longer demand permanence, you are no longer afraid of loss. This is the deep paradox of life. The more you try to hold on, the more you suffer, but the more you let go, the more beauty you receive. Because now, nothing is taken for granted. Now, each moment is sacred. Now, every goodbye is meaningful, every smile is precious, and every breath is a miracle. Meditation helps us internalize this. When you sit in stillness, You begin to observe how everything moves. The breath comes and goes. Thoughts arise and dissolve. Emotions visit and leave. Pain flares and fades. And you begin to realize there is no solid ground, no moment you can freeze. And that's okay, because beneath the movement, there is awareness, still, present, watching it all. And that awareness, that spacious, silent witnessing is who you are beyond form, beyond change. So you stop being afraid of what's coming, and you stop being haunted by what has gone. You begin to rest in the now, not because it will last, but because it's the only place anything is truly alive. And from this space, you live more lightly, you love more openly, you forgive more easily, because you know it's all passing. And so you ask yourself, do I want to carry this resentment another day? Do I want to waste this moment worrying about what I can't control? Do I want to miss this sunrise because I'm trapped in yesterday? Impermanence also helps us through grief. When someone we love leaves through distance or death, it feels unbearable. We want to scream at the sky. It wasn't supposed to be this way. And yet, deep down, we know it was always going to be this way. All forms end. All meetings eventually part. But the love, the lessons, the essence of what was shared that does not die, it transforms, it becomes part of us. And so we bow, we cry, we breathe, we don't rush healing. But we don't cling to sorrow either. We let it move through us like a wave, intense, but not endless. In nature, impermanence is everywhere. The petals fall, the tide recedes, the moon waxes and wanes, and not once does the tree resist the fall. Not once does the river freeze in protest. There is wisdom in that, a wisdom we can learn, a wisdom that says, trust the rhythm of life, trust the rising and falling, trust that even endings are beginnings in disguise. When you embrace impermanence, you become more resilient. You stop breaking under pressure. You learn to bend, to breathe, to begin again. You become like bamboo, strong yet flexible. You trust that no matter what happens, you will find your footing. Maybe not right away, maybe not easily, but eventually, because you are not your circumstances. You are the awareness that meets them. And with that awareness, you can choose. Choose to let go when it's time. Choose to love fully, knowing it might hurt. Choose to show up, even if nothing is guaranteed. Choose to live, not in fear of the ending, but in gratitude for the experience. This is the art of living, to hold everything tenderly, knowing it is not yours to keep, to weep when it leaves, but not to harden your heart, to rejoice when it arrives, but not to demand it stay, to move with life, not against it, to become the sky that welcomes every cloud. So next time you're clinging, pause, breathe, and ask, what am I afraid to lose? Then look deeper. Ask, what if letting go is not loss but liberation? Then soften, release, trust. Because nothing is permanent. And that is not something to fear. It is something to celebrate. The mind is a mirror. You become what you hold on to. Imagine your mind as a mirror, clear, reflective, limitless in its ability to hold everything without clinging to anything. It does not resist light or shadow, it simply reflects. But over time, that mirror begins to collect dust. Thoughts, emotions, opinions, memories, judgments, desires, they settle like particles across the surface. And if not cleaned regularly, you no longer see the world as it is. You see the dust. You no longer see others clearly. You project. You distort. You assume. You no longer even see yourself clearly. You become identified with the dust, with the noise, with the passing clouds. Buddhism teaches that your suffering does not come from the world, it comes from your mind's reaction to the world. And your reactions are not random, they are shaped by what you hold on to. Grudges, expectations, fear, Ego, comparison, regret, stories about how life should be, images of how you must appear. If your mind is filled with anger, you will see enemies everywhere. If it is filled with fear, you will feel unsafe even in peace. If it is filled with craving, you will never feel enough. And if it is filled with past wounds, you will bleed on moments that never hurt you. The Buddha taught that with our thoughts, we make the world. This is not just poetic, it is deeply practical. Your outer world is shaped by your inner landscape. If your thoughts are chaotic, your life will feel chaotic. If your heart is heavy with resentment, even love will feel burdensome. If your identity is rooted in victimhood, every interaction will feel like a threat. But if your mind is clear, even suffering can be transformed into wisdom. If your heart is open, even pain becomes a teacher. If your mirror is clean, everything becomes light. But cleaning the mirror of the mind is not easy. It requires deep presence, it requires honesty, and it requires letting go not just once, but every day, again and again. We live in a world that teaches us to collect more information, more labels, more opinions, more proof that we are right. But spiritual clarity is about subtraction, about removing, releasing, surrendering. Not to become nothing, but to become clear. Think about your current life. How much of your suffering comes from what you're holding on to? An old heartbreak, a harsh word someone said years ago, a failure that echoes in your mind every night, an expectation of how your life was supposed to go, a belief that you are not worthy until you reach some imagined finish line. These are not just thoughts, they are weights, they are chains. And yet you carry them because you think they are part of you. But they are not you, they are passing clouds. You are the sky. Meditation is the practice of watching the clouds without clinging to them. It is the art of sitting still and allowing the dust to settle. When you close your eyes and observe your thoughts, you begin to see clearly most of what fills the mind is recycled. Stories repeated, emotions replayed, scenarios rehearsed, but none of it is solid. It moves, it changes. And when you no longer grab at every thought, when you no longer believe every story, you begin to return to your original clarity. Not because you added something, but because you let go. In this way, Buddhism is not a religion of addition, it is a path of release. Release the idea that you must be perfect. Release the belief that your past defines you. Release the illusion that peace is somewhere far away. It is here, beneath the dust, beneath the thoughts, beneath the labels. The mirror never left. You just forgot to see it. But what about the difficult emotions? What about anger, grief, jealousy, anxiety? Are we to reject them? No, that is not the way. The mirror does not reject what it reflects. It simply does not cling. You must allow these emotions to arise, to breathe, to move. But you do not build a home in them. You greet them like visitors. You say, I see you, anger. I hear you, sadness. I welcome you, fear. And in doing so, you disarm them. You free yourself not by suppressing the storm, but by no longer identifying with the storm. This is the practice of mental purification, not through force, but through awareness, through choosing what to hold and what to release. Every time you notice a thought and let it go, you are polishing the mirror. Every time you forgive someone, you wipe away a layer of dust. Every time you pause before reacting, you shine a little more light. And slowly, over days and weeks and years, the mind becomes still. The heart becomes light. And the world begins to reflect your inner peace. And it works both ways. Just as your mind shapes the world reflects back your state of being. If you are reactive, the world will feel hostile. If you are peaceful, the same world feels kind. Two people can walk through the same street. One sees danger, the other sees beauty. What changed? The mirror. When you begin to live from a clear mirror, your relationships change. You no longer take things personally. You no longer project your wounds onto others. You listen more. You judge less. You stop needing people to be perfect because you've made peace with your own imperfections. You stop demanding others heal you because you've begun to heal yourself. You no longer seek validation because your reflection is enough. And this clarity is not passive, it is powerful. When the mind is calm, your decisions are wise, your actions are compassionate, your presence is healing. You walk through the world not as someone who needs to fix everything, but as someone who brings clarity wherever they go. Your peace becomes contagious, your joy becomes inspiring, and your love becomes unconditional, not because others changed, but because you did. This is not about spiritual bypassing. It is not about ignoring pain or pretending everything is okay. It is about facing reality with clear eyes, about seeing suffering and responding with compassion, not fear, about holding space for discomfort without becoming it, about knowing that the mirror reflects pain but is not the pain. So when life feels heavy, when your mind is clouded, when the world seems dark, return to the mirror. Ask yourself, what am I holding on to? And then ask, is it helping me see clearly? If not, let it go. Maybe not all at once, maybe not perfectly, but one thought at a time, one breath at a time. Because the truth is, you do not need to fix the whole world. You only need to clean your mirror. And when you do, the world changes not because it was broken, but because your clarity lets you finally see the light that was always there. You become still. You become aware. You become free. And the mirror, your mind shines again. If you've made it this far through the stillness, the storms, the surrender, the silence, then maybe you already sense the quiet truth that has been echoing through every lesson. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are not unloved by the universe. You are simply on the path of awakening, just like all of us. A soul remembering what it forgot. A heart healing what it once believed would never mend. A mind beginning to see, not through the fog of fear, but through the clear lens of truth. You came into this world with nothing but breath and being. Pure presence, no labels, no wounds, no shame. And underneath all the pain, all the disappointment, all the longing, that pure presence is still there, untouched, unscarred, waiting not to be found, but to be remembered. The sadness you feel, the loneliness that whispers late at night, the weight that sometimes seems impossible to carry, they are not signs that you are weak. They are signs that you are human, that your heart still longs to connect, that your soul still remembers something deeper, something sacred. And that is not a curse. That is grace. The Buddha never promised that life would be painless. He simply showed that pain is not the end. That suffering, when met with awareness, becomes a teacher. That loneliness, when met with compassion, becomes a doorway. That emptiness, when not feared, reveals spaciousness, the space to begin again. You don't have to fix your entire life today. You don't have to pretend everything is okay. You only need to sit, breathe, feel, listen, and trust that each small step you take inward is a return to wholeness, a return to peace, a return to yourself. So next time you feel overwhelmed, remember, storms pass, wounds heal. Winter always gives way to spring. And you, like the lotus, can rise from even the muddiest waters, sun-touched, pure, and radiant, not by force, not by pretending, but by simply being, and by trusting the timeless wisdom whispered in every moment. This too shall pass, and so will is stronger, softer, and more awake than ever before. You are not alone. You are not abandoned. You are the awareness behind the sadness, the silence beneath the noise, the light inside the dark. And that is enough. Let go. Breathe. Begin again. And walk gently home to yourself.